Since we're looking at Welcome to Caribbean Thought Lecture 6, since we I'm just talking generally here as we introduce the class, and I mentioned the point of the importance of talking about the U.S. and America, looking at American history. When you study Caribbean thought, you have to also, in some ways, look at American history because and just so you know, the American Revolution leading to their independence from Britain, and how that also probably may have helped to influence the Haitian Revolution, and before that the French Revolution. But we have to, we study Caribbean thought and Caribbean history, which involves studying Caribbean history and a critical. We have to look at American history and the American Revolution and what happened, because the American Revolution was very important, because America separated from Britain in 1776, 1775, 77, because they wanted to control their own interests, because there was a group of aristocrats who were, some people argue, were greedy, but they wanted to control their own interests, and they were seeing that all these monies are being sent back to the nobles, and there were more and more was being demanded of America, of the aristocrats in America, and so they wanted to separate. So part of the American Revolution and them securing their independence is part of the aristocrats and the noble and the wealthy class in the Americas, okay, who wanted to control the wealth and keep most of their wealth in America, and not share it with Britain. And so they separated from Britain. But of course, just so you know, beyond America, they got their independence and freedom from Britain, but they still continued with colonization. They still had slaves. And although slavery was abolished in 1833, and the Emancipation Act was reached much of the Caribbean in 1865, 66. Okay. 65, I believe. What happened was that America still continued with slavery. They still had slavery. But we talk about Puerto Rico being colonized by the U.S. and the population of Puerto Rico is quite interesting. But we also have the colonization of Cuba by they tried to colonize Cuba, and for a short period of time they had dominated Cuba, the U.S. But and then we talk about Fidel Castro and the fight against U.S. occupation and the elites, because part of the struggle in some of these Caribbean islands was the elites fighting against. It was the working class fighting against the elites who were connected and with the dominant class in the U.S. or in the colonial country. But anyway, we have to look at what America's interest in the Caribbean, and they played a very significant role in the Caribbean, although they themselves were colonized. But please remember also we have to look at the population of the Americas, because you also had the independence that the U.S. got was an independence where the elites, the Anglo-Saxons and the white people wanted to control their own interests and cut themselves off from Britain. But the black people never got freedom. The black and brown people weren't freed in the U.S. And there was, of course, travel between the Americas was quite busy. There was a lot of travel. There was a lot of people seeking freedom and some people went to the Caribbean. And when Haiti got their independence, many people made their way to Haiti. And even before that, during slavery in the 1700s, we you might hear of a very important figure, Dottie Bookman. Dottie Bookman is a very important figure um, in Caribbean history and even in the Haitian Revolution, because Dottie Bookman, he was executed by the French because they said he was a terrorist, he was a rebel. He was actually, he helped to influence Oliver Toussaint, which ultimately led to Haiti garnering their freedom and their independence from the French, beating Napoleon and the French. But it started from Dottie Bookman, who was a slave who came to Jamaica on a slave ship during the early part of the 1700s, and he came from Senegambia, and From Senegambia, he came to Jamaica on a slave ship. By that time, of course, Britain had control of the West Indies, much of the West Indies, especially the English-speaking West Indies, or the British West Indies. But he came to Jamaica, and how he made his way to Haiti is quite interesting. But he came to Jamaica on a slave ship, and he escaped, I guess. Well, not that I guess. He escaped on a slave ship. He escaped and made his way to Haiti, and and Dottie Bookman, which is spelled Dutty, Bookman, Boukman. Dottie Bookman, very important figure, um, led many slave revolts. And important thing about Dottie Bookman is that he started Obia in Jamaica, actually. But I do not believe that his intention was to start Obia. His intention was to start probably some other religion. But whatever beliefs he brought with him, many of this, many of the, it it morphed into Obia. By the time he escaped from Jamaica and made his way to Haiti in the latter part, in the 1700s, by then he started voodoo. He morphed into voodoo, probably, which is what he wanted, was to start the religion of voodoo. And if you look at Ghana or Togo, some of the traditions, that some of the Afro-Caribbean, some of the African traditions, revivalism or voodoo or obia, some of that still persists today in some of the traditions, African traditions or practices that we have in the Caribbean, which comes from Ghana or Senegambia or Senegal, which is now you have Senegal, you have Gambia, you have Togo, sorry. But Dottie Bookman, we understand that he was versed in the Quran. He was a priest. He was muscular and very intelligent and smart and attracting. And he was a threat to the French. They didn't like Dottie Bookman. He was branded a terrorist, and he led many slave revolts. He was a priest. He started a group. He started the African traditions, that's religious traditions that early traditions that we have in Haiti and in Jamaica and whatever, and by extension, other slaves that escaped from Haiti and Jamaica that went to Cuba and other parts of the Caribbean. Some of their beliefs was um, syncretized into the traditions that they have in these countries, and in fact even how they practice their Christianity or their Catholicism. Some of it is inherited from some of these African traditions to a small extent. But but one of the things we know about Dottie Bookman, you thought that slaves weren't educated, but yes, he could read the Quran. So obviously, a lot of the slaves that came from Ghana, that came from Africa. Obviously, Africa, the African slaves, or the African people, sorry, before the transatlantic, before slavery, before the 1600s, what we know of is that they they were influenced by the Muslim traditions. They were exposed to the Quran. They could read the Quran, many of them, and Arabic languages. So obviously he could read, um uh he could
Sorry,
speak.
sir. You mean
Yes,
coming from Africa?
yes, yes. Yes,
Oh,
yes, that is exactly, that was my reaction. Yes. And some of these things, I am 44 years old and I'm just learning some of these things because I just started doing research about Dottie Bookman and African traditions and so on. I'm just because, growing up and being exposed to the kind of religion, theology, and history that we have, you always thought that the Africans, they never had religions, they never had many traditions. They were devils and demons,
yeah.
steeped in concubinage and so on. And when you read like people like
Mhm.
Edith Clarke, I'm sure, oh, and when you read her book, My Mother Who Fathered Me, and then she's trying to explain why these groups of Jamaicans in these rural areas, why they were so steeped in concubinage and why they never have a nuclear family, and part of the explanation by these functionalist Caribbean sociologists was that, well, it comes from Africa. And I was very upset when I started to study African traditions, and I'm like, no, this is not true. It is not true that they practice this kind of thing. Okay, we get that information from what other sociologists were saying of the Africans, trying to demean them. Okay, in fact, they had a strong sense of family. Okay, they had a strong sense of, in some traditions, it was very monogamous. Okay, and in some senses, of course, they had a polygamous relationship stemming from the Quran and the beliefs that they have several wives to one, but there was one main wife, or not one main, but but yes, Dottie Bookman, when he came to Jamaica, he could read the Quran, was versed in the Quran, and the Quran is written, and I have the Quran here, and it's written not in English, not in it's written in the Muslim language, okay, in Arabic, in Aramaic and Arab languages. Yes, I can't speak that language. I never studied. I studied Hebrew and Greek. That's what I read. Okay, but it's quite interesting. They could read, and he had started the tradition and then ended up uh, in in and I'm going to play a tape in a few minutes with where CLR James is talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about CLR James today, but CLR James, because last week we ended talking about his book, The Black Jacobin, and where I provided it, and we're going to start it today and go into something else. But so when you start to study the slavery, so, and by the way, I talk about, I don't want to talk about plantation society in this class because you guys know what happened in slavery, how the slaves were treated, and sometimes I said to people, we want to move away from that. We want to. There are scholars now, black scholars are now moving, and when you study critical race theory, we are moving away from thinking about the victim, our victimization. Now we want to look at what we can say. For example, you're learning about Dottie Bookman and how that these slaves who come from Africa, they came to the Caribbean. They were attracting, they were muscular, they were powerful because they got the best of the best. The slaves that came to the Caribbean, and when you read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, part of the underdevelopment of Africa comes from also the development of the New World or the Americas or the Caribbean because they wanted the best of the best. People couldn't come here. They couldn't survive the transatlantic. And by the way, I'm gonna play a tape for you. Oh my God! I'm gonna play something for you guys because when you start to study the Caribbean and when you start to look at, I want, in the future, one of the things I want to do in the future when I start to study Africology, I want to do a study of Caribbean genealogy and African genealogy, and to see if they're to look. That means we have to also know. I want to look at DNA of some of Arawakan Taino people, several Taino people, and DNA of historical Africans.
Sir,
Yes,
did you do yours?
I haven't done mine yet, no, because but I have a lot. I know a lot about my history and my background, stemming way back because part of my heritage come from Scottish, part come from the Maroons. Okay,
Mm.
so yeah, so we'll talk. Okay, fine. I don't know you guys want to get into that, so maybe we can talk about that because maybe you guys did some research and we could share and see what you did. But some of you may not. But I believe I'm going to play this tape in a second because there is some connection between. At some point, they said that the people in the Caribbean, the early people, the Taino people, in terms of their people don't know how they came to be settle there, but what usually happens in islands is that people normally wash up on islands. And when you start to study, they said that people 600 years apart were connected when you study DNAs, and farmers were washed up onto the Caribbean. And they coming and many of them coming as far as, and I believe from Africa in some point in time, because we know that at some point in time, some people from Africa washed up onto the Caribbean, and some kind of life started in the islands of the Caribbean, which led to the people. Because when you start to study the crafts and the artifacts, because that's what when you start to study people and understanding people and how they're connected, you study their products, what they produce. What people produce is very important when you're studying your people, their artifacts, their music, part of studying culture. That's why you study connection and heritage and roots. Because how are you connected when you start to study their productions, their music? Say for example, you study rap music, you study jazz music. Jazz and rap music, a lot of when you start to study the jazz and rap music that come from African Americans and Afro experience, a lot of that have reggae influences, and this month is reggae month. When you start to study the music, the rhythm and the beat in reggae, but the same rhythm and beat in reggae comes in African traditions with the kumina and the mental. Cyril pick ticks, Cyril pick ticks, Cyril pick ticks, Africa backbone, Cyril pick ticks, Cyril pick ticks, Africa backbone, Cyril pick ticks, Cyril pick ticks, Cyril pick ticks, Africa backbone, Cyril pick ticks. All that drumming and that beat, that defines jazz and reggae. Okay, so and reggae, but the earliest forms of that stem from and dancehall, but that comes from and travel is important. Travel has always defined people of the Caribbean. Okay, but when you when part of studying a culture and you study their music, you study their products, you study their crafts, you study their writings, you study the Greco-Roman world, you study their writings, how they think. And then you can compare it with what exists. So the Caribbean people there's a connection, a deep connection. That's why you study Caribbean, you study the kumina and the mentor. That finds its way in the reggae and in the jazz and in the rap, which comes from a people who are black and brown, the black and brown experience mixed up with the ibodized culture. But you study the people and you see how we are connected, the experiences that connects us. So I say connections is very important when you study people and Caribbean. Then you realize how we are connected as a human race and as a people. Okay, but as I said to you, so the connections when you start to study the crafts from the Taino people and the Arawakans and the Incas and the so on and along, but you find that some of these look just like what pertains thousands of years ago in Africa. And how these people look and how the resemblance in the bearers. Now we need to what we need to do is a DNA study, and we have to excavate people, Africans from thousands of years ago, and compare it with DNA from the Taino people from hundreds of thousands of years ago, and because to see the resemblance, to see the connections. But the point I'm but Dirty Bookman when you start. But anyway, we want to reimagine the slave when we get into slavery. Now, when you start to think about slavery, reimagine the slave, not thinking about them as inept or tribal or using secondary language, yes, or so on. But we want to reimagine people within critical or black peoples and their or Caribbean peoples within critical race theory, not thinking race, but moving away from a victim approach to a hero approach, looking at their resistance and how and their resistance suggests their intelligence. Their resistance during the period of slavery suggests their intelligence, and people like Dana Berry, who wrote the book A Pound for Price for Their Pound of Flesh. It's a book, and in fact, maybe I should maybe talk. I mean, that's the epilogue in the book that I'm writing now, which if I had finished, I would have probably done a reflection of the class today. But she talked about looking at the slave and how they weren't supposed to have family during slavery. During slavery. We weren't supposed to have family. Okay. Fatherhood, motherhood, that was stripped from the slave. Fatherhood, motherhood. Okay. Children. Because the slave, so we understand the slave was seen as property. Okay. And they were arranged like that. And their needs was taken care of them because they were like horses. They were like donkeys. They were property, and they had property value. And they were and the owners were insured against losses if they were supposed to lose such a value. But they were valuable to the extent that they provided profit to someone else. Okay, that's the only value, but not they weren't. So the slaves, so that when the the Africans came to the New World, but they weren't seen as peoples because by that time they came up with a botched theory that was on the back shelves of academia that justified races, and that some races and the races from Africa were demons, the devils, and they couldn't talk, and then they had no religion or tongue, and then use that to say that they are property. And so but now we want to move away from that to consider the slave and their resistance as the fact they recognized their value. When you start to read Dana Berry's book and several black scholars read how they now look at the transatlantic period and slavery and look at their resistance. Look at how they tried to preserve their family, their culture, their heritage. But I say sometimes when you study black people, when you try to study your heritage, and I've done this study asking the students in my class to trace their heritage, they sometimes have a problem going far back. It's as if there is no connection somewhere. There's a connection, so they make generalizations because there was a strategy to try to disconnect the slave from their personhood. When Frantz Fanon in his book Black Skin, White Mask, and in The Wretched of the Earth talks about colonization as the depersonalization, the stripping away of one's humanity. So colonization, which yes is about theft, but it also involves the depersonalization, the stripping away of a person's humanity, any value that they have, so that now you can justify and support the treatment that is meted out to a thing. So that was part of colonization. That's why Frantz Fanon, who is a psychologist, was okay, but also writing in terms of responding to the issue of colonialism, talks about the black man and the black woman and black peoples and the stripping away and the brainwashing. And that is why we talk about attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs and how, and I said to you, growing up in Jamaica, I grew up with a disdain towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs, towards the things that come, my stuff, my things that emanate from me. I have my attitudes towards that, okay, I grew up in a culture that disdained that this, but we come from that same culture. And that speaks to such an ambivalence. That speaks to such to and that is and then we talk about the in the Caribbean, not just the Jamaican experience, the Caribbean and post-colonial experience, the products that we try to use and how our Caribbean culture and black culture is penetrated with this with cosmetics that now that try to change our look and change because of what that how we the slavery and how we were made to be and the brainwashing and stuff and this embrace of Eurocentric ideas and Eurocentric speech. And we look down, and if you can't talk, if you make a little mistake, go put the subject and you don't have subject verb agreement, is a big problem because they create rubrics to help to normalize a kind of knowledge that Michel Foucault talks about in his postmodernism and compose. Now you start to understand how important. Yes, people eschew intellectualism but yes, people like Gramsci talks about eschew intellectualism, but not in the sense. But he is against intellectualism in terms of a status quo. But we create it so that we can continue a kind of the status quo and privilege in society. So people eschew studies at this intellectual level, even in some of your churches, even in the church that I grew up at first in the evangelistic center before I transitioned into United Church. They eschew going to seminaries and stuff. Some people eschew that. And even when you start to study history, they'll okay, and slavery, the slave should not, if the slave is exposed to writing and education, that is a problem. Okay, and if any white person or abolitionist was caught teaching a slave to read and write, that slave would be removed from that particular person, and that person may be jailed, fined. It's not supposed to happen. It is a sin to do that. But I mean, anyways, but this is quite powerful. That's why I say it is very important for us to now start to study and to think critically about ourselves, about what we know, about what we have. And we talk about institutions sometimes are created to prevent you from learning anything else from but because they're trying to continue their privilege. But it's good to explore other things. But anyways, I was just talking off tangent here. Powerful concepts here. Right, Alicia?
Yes, sir.
I'm telling you, this is a deep thing. I fully appreciate, I give God thanks for the opportunity to be able to learn some of these things, to be exposed to these things, and I relish the opportunity of sharing it with people. So, you know what I mean, I'm all about making popular what was in Monopoly. But everybody's still not in class. I know one student had texted me saying that she'll be late. But we'll push on. So I'm gonna play the end of this tape that we have from last week. It's just about 10 minutes, and then we will take a quick 5-minute break, and we will get into your heritage quickly to see what you guys have in terms of tell me a little bit about your heritage. What did you find? I'm interested to find out. Okay? And we'll talk about that. I'll probably share some more about my heritage and what I found out. And probably that will take up much of the class, and then we will transition into the poll that we did that we want me to continue, and then finish with comparing Ireland and the Caribbean. So we're going to watch this quickly, take a 5 to 10 minute break, and then go into the poll that we did the last time. We're going to finish that, have to see what you guys come up with, and discuss the answers together. No, but that's after we do the heritage thing. We go into the poll, and then we'll finish, and then we wrap up. All right. So sit back, relax, get your coffee, and here we go. I'll play where I'm sharing my screen. So I'm about to play this. Are you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go.
Revolution. I'm Ulysses Glasgow, and I'm your lecturer for this series. C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins, is a powerful and definitive history of one of the most important but under-recognized events in history, the slave revolution that took place in Haiti from 1791 until 1803. The book is important not only as a historical account of the event, but as one of the very first examples of history told from the point of view of the oppressed population, in this case the slaves of the island. James was
It's told from the point of view of the oppressed population, the people living on the island. That is the subaltern view. That is history from below. Okay? Good.
Politically engaged journalist from Trinidad, and he spent considerable time in the book discussing the truly awful conditions of slavery in Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was then called. He looked at before the revolution and the remarkable leadership qualities of the slave-turned-revolutionary Toussaint Louverture. James' outlook in the book was very much influenced by Marxist philosophy, and this is what set the book apart from other accounts by other scholars of the Haitian Revolution. James wrote, "The revolt is the only successful slave revolt in history, and the odds it had to overcome."
I know it's 13 minutes. This is very important, guys. Very important. Okay? To Saint Sailor James's account of what happened in Haiti and the Haitian Revolution is different, okay, from all the other accounts that we've had. Because the other account was told from a top-down approach. It wasn't from the subaltern. It wasn't told by the very people who the history affected, who were affected by the very history. And it was told in a certain way, in a different kind of a way. But now it's being told by Sailor James, who is in a kind of a Marxist bent, but quite very important. Very important.
Is evidence of the magnitude of the interest. James wrote, "The revolt is the only successful part from other accounts influenced by Marxist philosophy, and this is what set the book apart from other accounts by other scholars of the Haitian Revolution." James wrote, "The revolt is the only successful slave revolt in history, and the odds it had to overcome is evidence of the magnitude of the interests that were involved." Beyond the bottom-up history, that is, history told from the perspective of the marginalized rather than those of the elite status or politically influential members of society, readers of the Black Jacobins will gain a greater understanding of the political dynamics of the late 18th century. Now, this includes not only the events in Saint-Domingue, but the influence of the revolutions that took place in both America and France, and the key role that slavery played in these politics. When you're looking at a book like The Black Jacobin, you will be able to gain a fuller appreciation of the truly barbaric practice and the nature of the economies that were built from that practice of slavery. Now, the book is a radical work, and so it will appeal to readers who lean towards revolutionary politics, but it is also a work that is very engaging to a wider audience. So let's look at the work in the context of how it was written. The book, The Black Jacobins, is an example of what is called history from below. Now, although the term itself denotes works of history told from the perspective of people of low social and economic status, it was only used by historians long after The Black Jacobins was published in 1938. James' book was one of several works that inspired the field of subaltern or post-colonial studies. Here, historians from the branches of social inquiry, which deal with the various legacies of the colonial period, write history from the point of view of the subalterns being those groups that have been excluded from traditional power structures and opportunities, like slaves and peasants. James's approach to history, and indeed the whole of the subaltern school, cannot be understood without appreciating the works of Karl Marx, whose idea of history was shaped by the German philosopher Hegel's notion of the dialectic. a word that denotes the tension created between an idea or concept and the reactions that rise up in opposition to it. This antithesis eventually leads to a kind of synthesis, a fusion of the two ideas. Karl Marx built on this idea of the dialectic to develop his notion of historical materialism, where history is pushed forward by economic forces. The word materialism here should not be confused with its contemporary meaning, which is a focus on material possessions. Rather, Marx believed that the driving force of history was how the means of production, or the tools and resources used to produce goods and services, how those are owned and organized in any society. For example, in a capitalist society, most economic activity is in private hands, and businesses act in a way that promotes the profits and interests of their owners. As Marx wrote in the German Ideology, this mode of production must not be considered simply as being the production of the physical existence of the individuals. Rather, it is a definite form of activity of these individuals, a definite form of expressing their life, a definite mode of life on their part. As individuals express their life, so they are. He went on to write,
We're almost wrapping up. We finished. We won't go beyond 6:15. What I'll do is we'll pick up with this video in what time is it now? Because it's 6:05. We started a bit late, so and it's a very good video because I wanted to make a point about this. Very important point. You guys can interact with it in your interaction papers if you want. But this is important because we talk about production. And Marx look at the when you look at a society, when you study society, you ask the question, in whose interests? And when you study the society, you can study the production, how the society is arranged, how the society is arranged around its production. Who produces what and who is not producing what? Okay, what are the gains of the production? When you compare the global north and the global south, or the Caribbean as again, we talk about in the global south, in Jamaica, okay, in Jamaica or the global south, the Jamaica or the global south, the production, their specialization in the global north is more, but it's more around the raw material. Say for example, let's look at bauxite, okay. We are more, we focus, the Caribbean, Jamaica, where they focus on extracting the bauxite, okay, extracting the raw material, and then we send it to the global north for them to refine it and for the finishing it, and then they sell it back to us for how much money do we get from the raw material? First of all, we don't have that. I am making a very important point, actually, and I hope you guys are understanding. I said again, when you study societies, when you study societies, you ask in whose interest. It's very important. When you read people like Karl Marx or Adam Smith or so on, I mean, today people have no time to read history, but history is important because you learn from history, and you don't want. Sometimes you learn. It's important to learn from history so that you don't make the same mistakes. But it's important. Okay, so history is important. And as I said to you, Immanuel Kant says history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. And when you look at history, and by the way, recently the Prime Minister of Jamaica talked about crime and violence and their ability to bring violence. But I want to actually make a point about that and I tweeted something to that effect. But before that, he talked about the importance of making sacrifices for the future. And I said, and he said, making sacrifices for the future. In other words, So in other words, how we spend in terms of how Jamaica spend now, we can't just spend wantonly. We have to put money aside for the future. That is important. Um, that is important. And in terms of, and I said, and I responded to the Prime Minister's tweet or comment saying that I have said that in the book Neoliberal Globalization in terms in a more deeper study and reflection, looking at the looking at the economic history of Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean and the global South, saying that not only have the Caribbean suffered from a lack of unity, not only have the Caribbean lost sight in the move towards securing and garnering their independence, the Caribbean and the countries of the global South lost sight of yes, they were weak need and they lacked vision, and lost sight of what was coming in the future. We talk about dramatic irony when you watch it. What is dramatic irony? You're watching a movie, and one of the main protagonists or the main characters, or one of it is a scene where somebody is about to enter another room, and the gunman is in that other room with a gun waiting. You, the audience, you know that the gunman is there, but the actor on the screen, he doesn't know that the gunman is there. But he thinks that's it, and he's moving, pressing to open the door to go into the next room to hide, not knowing that the gunman is there. That's dramatic irony. Yes, that's dramatic. That's the irony. And I talk about the irony of independence was that yes, the Caribbean decided to go it alone by the 1950s, embracing this nationalist wave. They decided to go it alone, which I believe was part of what has dogged them. The Caribbean decided to go it alone. They are small countries. I believe that then they would have benefited from a federation, but decided to go it alone. And if they had known what was coming in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, they would have decided to keep that federation and not go it alone and develop and secure independence broad based instead of having individual negotiations. That has affected us. But what has also affected us, of course, part of that is a strategy. What has also affected the Caribbean, some people, Haiti and Cuba is in one sense, they have been affected by something else, the kind of independence, that the way in which they secured their independence. But as it relates to the other parts of the Caribbean, their independence, the strategy that has gone into this, when you look at the economic arrangements, I talk about the issue when they study society. You want to study the economics, the production, and by that the stages of production. The stages of production is important because although people were talking about having globalization and turning the world into a global village, I think part of the plan was to make the Caribbean, and I say part of the plan, whose plan? Part of the framers of the New World, starting from 1944, the most powerful countries, part of the plan, the most powerful countries were supposed to continue to benefit from globalization. And so part of that is the way in which the value that is placed on where people are in terms of the production process determine how much money you're paid. To the Caribbean, in terms of the specialization in the Caribbean, was supposed to, in terms of where are we in terms of the stage of production, the middle stages, the early stages, or the finish. And I said we are at the early stages, and the way in which the Caribbean was developed was for us to be at the early stages, and for us to be independent. Individually, we can only operate at the early stages of production, which is the raw material. Okay, that's not where the value is. That's not where you stand to gain the most. And that's okay. So it's okay if you have oil. It's okay if you have bauxite and minerals and resources. Okay, but you do not get the benefit. You do not. Okay, and if you do, most of the money goes overseas as royalties. And because the Caribbean, we don't have the kind of capital intensive technology to do the kind of, to be at the middle or the final stages of production. But in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, part of the plan was to make the Caribbean competitive, which would require investing in our development. Part of investing in the development would mean that you can't just spend on consumption. But by the 70s, the Manley government was cited as spending, using all of the windfall profit of the 50s and the 60s. The government was spending it on the consumption or social welfare and taking care of, and not investing heavily in development, so that by the time the 70s and 80s hit us, and now all of a sudden we want to get money to invest in development. By that time, it was too late. The IMF and the World Bank and the rich countries weren't willing to give Jamaica and the Caribbean money to invest in their development so that they can out rival them. Why would, I'm lending you money? Why would I want to give you money to make you so developed? Okay, so because we live in a competitive world, and so I believe there is some amount of naivete in Caribbean politicians. Not today. I think not today. I don't think they are as naive. Okay. Yes, they were opportunists as well, because and yet they meant well in some senses, but in another sense, there are those who were also working to oppose those who were promoting nationalism, wanted to side with the elites and who were benefiting from the elite. And of course, there were the nationalists who wanted to go it alone. So there was blame to be thrown all over the place. There's blame everywhere. There's blame to be thrown all over. But of course, part of the plan was to make the Caribbean not as competitive as the post-colonial or the countries. Like, it's an example, what's going on in the war in Russia today. And part of that stems from wanting to continue to assert their dominance. Yes, slaves were supposed to be free, but they weren't supposed to outrival the former masters. Okay? Whenever the freed slaves started to show any amount of gain or profits, as if they're going to do well, then there's always a plan or a strategy to ensure to continue to hold or to keep them down. Through various tactics. We talk about what's going on in Israel, in Russia today, where Russia is fighting Ukraine because they want to continue their dominance. That they want to continue their dominance over the region, and so they are picking on a smaller country, which has the potential to outrival Russia and to outdo Russia, but that's part of the problem. Ukraine was not supposed to outrival Russia. Black people weren't supposed to outdo the other countries. So that's part of when you study it. So what is the stages of production in the Caribbean? So that's the point I was making right here. But let's continue. I don't want to belabor the point. Have the technology to turn the the bauxite into aluminium and the minerals, the finish, one. Okay, and two, and we don't have the capital, and we were not developed, and we weren't developed in a way to develop our capacity to be able to do that. So now we still have to, although we have bauxite, in terms of the production process, our focus is more on the raw material. Talk about specialization and the raw material, the input as against output. What in the Caribbean, when you look at the Caribbean or compare societies and you look at the production process, okay, are we at the final stage of production or the early stage? No, majority of the Caribbean countries or the post-industrial countries, they are more on the first stages. And not only that, that was the idea in recreating the new world, in recreating the Caribbean after independence and so on, making in terms of globalization, the Caribbean and the black and brown countries were supposed to be the workers. When you look at the production cycle or the stages of production, the stage of production that the Caribbean should occupy is at the beginning, the first stage. Okay, the raw material, or extracting the bauxite, and then we send it to the mother country or to the global south to do the finish because they have the know-how. We don't have the know-how. We don't have the intelligence. Okay, they have the intelligence. They have the capability. In terms of you look at the production, so the production of our the fact that most of our economic arrangement borders or focuses on the raw material, the early stage, that also affects our gain and our wealth and our earnings. Those who those countries and peoples who are more focused on the last or the end or the output or the last stage of production, society determines that they get more money, they are paid more, okay, they benefit more than those who are at the first stage. Who are those at the first stage? The Caribbean or the black and brown nations. When you start to look at the production, how production happens in societies and where people are in terms of the stages, and it will give you an understanding of the gains that some people have and the gains that some people don't have. Okay, when you start to study society. Anyways, let's wrap up this real quickly because I'm going to stop at 6:15 and then we'll pick up where we left off. Okay?
Like in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generals weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. So, in other words, Marx believed that individuals tended to see the world according to their role within the means of production, as business owners, for example, or as wage earners. The interests of those often competing groups is what drives history, according to Marx. Antonio Gramsci extended Marx's theory to the discussion of culture, and in doing so laid the groundwork for subaltern history, or history from below. Put simply, Gramsci developed a theory of cultural hegemony, stating that the dominant social class, for example the bourgeoisie or the business owners, not only had a big influence over the economy, but they had a big influence over a society's culture as well. Gramsci believed that the creation of an alternative or proletarian culture, that is, a culture of the workers promoting revolutionary ideas, that these were necessary for the overthrow of capitalism and the rise of the communist state. So to some extent, this is also the goal of subaltern studies, of which the Black Jacobins plays a very early part. Subaltern studies represent the history of groups excluded from the dominant culture. While James was strongly influenced by a Marxist approach to history, the Black Jacobins is not rooted in any particular academic school or debate. Rather, it emerged from the tense political environment of the late 1930s. C.L.R. James was a keen observer of both political events and cultural developments, and there is some evidence that the author was inspired by his immediate surroundings in London while he was writing The Black Jacobins. In The Black Jacobins, C.L.R. James asks a central question: how did a group of uneducated slaves in what is today Haiti successfully overthrow their colonial masters and defeat the invasions that followed from France, from Britain, and from Spain? As the only successful slave revolt in history, the events in Saint-Domingue warrant attention. As an historian, James' aim is to describe the slave revolt from the point of view of the revolutionaries and their leader, Toussaint Louverture. Throughout James's historical investigations, he is asking another question as well. What is the nature of revolution? And what are the conditions in which the proletariat, or the workers, can overthrow those responsible for their oppression? Although James does not explicitly frame his discussion in these terms, his political viewpoint informs his discussion of history. James's Marxist beliefs also place the book squarely in the heart of the political conflicts of the late 1930s. As he writes, the violent conflicts of our age enable our practiced vision to see into the very bones of previous revolutions more easily than heretofore. He refers to the violent upheavals going on across Europe at the time, the eve of World War II. He notes the revolts held by the fascist leader in Spain when he writes of Franco's heavy artillery, and refers to the mass repression in the Soviet Union when he writes of the rattle of Stalin's firing squads. Such is our age, and this book is of it, with something of the fever and the fret. He writes in The Black Jacobins, the writer has sought not only to analyze, but to demonstrate in their movement the economic forces of the age, their molding of society and politics, of men in the mass and individual men, the powerful reaction of these on their environment at one of those rare moments when society is at boiling point and therefore fluid. As a work of history, The Black Jacobins builds upon previous works on the Revolution in Saint-Domingue and the conditions there more generally, much of it published in French. These works include scholarly histories, first-person accounts, official archives, and travel books. James provides an annotated bibliography of these works in the book, in which he writes, despite the importance and interest of the subject, it was for long difficult to find in English or French a comprehensive treatment of the Saint-Domingue Revolution. Both in insight and objectivity, the Haitian writers are easily the best. James draws on a long list of sources, notably Colonel Henri de Poyon Belize, and his history of 1899, Histoire militaire de la Révolution de Saint-Domingue, or A Military History of the Revolution of San Domingo. James writes of this book, this is the official French account. Poyon misunderstands the whole campaign, both the offensive plan of Leclerc and the defensive plan of Toussaint. There is no limit to the brazenness of these imperialist historians. Despite disagreeing with Poyon's version of history, James finds the historian to be a careful scholarly writer, and is able to build on Poyon's work. This is a theme in James's work. Though he frequently disagrees with the work of scholars who went before him, he finds that he can use their work in his own. In an important way, James's history of the Haitian Revolution builds on the work of the scholars of another revolt that started barely 2 years earlier, the French Revolution. As he notes in The Black Jacobins, it is impossible to understand the Saint-Domingue Revolution unless it is studied in close relationship with the Revolution in France. Fortunately, the French historical school of the French Revolution is one of the greatest historical schools of Western civilization. James lists in the book several French historians who inspired his own study of the Haitian Revolution. They exposed the economic foundations of the French Revolution. They wrote about the personalities of the main actors and covered the politics of the period. James credits these influences in the book on the Haitian Revolution. I have sought all through to show the direct influence of the French Revolution on events and leading personalities in Saint-Domingue. It appears from James's biography that the awareness of and interest in this history was sparked when he moved to Europe in the 1930s. In that sense, the intellectual basis of the work is James's attempt to unify his understanding of West Indian culture, that is, the culture of the islands of the Caribbean Sea, and history with the debates over history and politics going on at the time in England and France. So, in other words, James was very much influenced by historians of the French Revolution when he wrote The Black Jacobins. This is D. Elizabeth Glasgow.
Caribbean history and DNA. Caribbean history and DNA. All right, before we get into that, very important, I want to make one point. Well, so far, The post-colonialism provided new freedoms, met with dogmas, rules, and the bureaucratic phenomenon. That's if I were to tell you, if I were to provide a reflection paper about all that we've said so far in this class, and especially last week, I would say post-colonialism, which is independence and freedoms. Independence, we're talking about independence. Post-colonialism provided what? New freedoms, new freedoms, new freedoms. Met with dogmas, rules, and the bureaucratic phenomenon. Let me say this again. Post-colonialism provided new freedoms. Post-colonialism, independence, provided new freedoms. Met with dogmas, rules, and the bureaucratic phenomenon. We call this the irony of independence. Yes, we call it the irony of independence, the irony of freedom. Okay, it's the same thing as saying where, let me open my screen. Frantz Fanon, in his book Wretched of the Earth, I think I was Frantz Fanon in the Wretched of the Earth. Said, and I was reading it, the colonized, underdeveloped man, and I'm reading the foreword entitled Framing Fanon by Homi K. Bhabha. According to Homi Bhabha, speaking of who is quoting, Homi Bhabha is here quoting Frantz Fanon in the book Wretched of the Earth. And this is a translation of the book to English. And in the foreword, she quotes him as saying, according to Frantz Fanon, and I quote, the colonized, underdeveloped man, the colonized, underdeveloped man, is today. So he says the colonized, underdeveloped man is today what he is today, what he was in the yesterday, but what he is today. And he's writing in the 1960s, late 50s, going into the 60s. The colonized, underdeveloped man is today. What is he today? And that's from the 1960s. It's a political creature. He is a political creature in the most global sense of the term, in the most global sense of the term. Fanon writes in The Wretched of the Earth, and it is my purpose almost half a century later to ask, what might be saved from Fanon's ethics and politics of decolonization, to help us reflect on globalization in our sense of the term, because he's writing that what the colonized man has become today. And Homi Bhabha is saying, what can we interpret from his writing of what the colonized man is today, which is him speaking about the colonized man in terms of his decolonization, his post-independence, or his freedoms, in relation to globalization. And I'm going to say even not just globalization, neoliberal globalization. It's not just globalization, because nothing is wrong with globalization. Where goods and services cross borders. It is when you have a kind of globalization steeped in a strategy facilitated by the bureaucratic phenomenon of the Washington Consensus. Why is it that nobody's stopping me? Sir, what the heavens are you talking about? What are you talking about? Oh my God. Washington consented bureaucratic phenomenon. Hopefully you guys have bought the book or have access to the book. Or if you go on Amazon and go to the look inside feature, I think the whole preface is there, and there's a part where I define the bureaucratic phenomenon as what has helped to define neoliberalism. The bureaucratic phenomenon is what is the bureaucratic phenomenon? It's actually Pharisicalism. Do as I say, but not as I do. It's a kind of Pharisicalism, a kind of strategy that continues to define policies and arrangements between countries and peoples today. A neoliberal globalization strategy is a strategy that is facilitated by arrangements perpetuated and administered by institutions such as the WTO and the IMF and the IMDb and so on and so forth, and the ICC, so on and so forth. Institutions. The bureaucratic phenomenon is steeped in bureaucratism. In the bureaucratic phenomenon, but which is duplicitous in a sense. Because what is bureaucratic phenomenon? It is one that pretends towards free trade and free market ideas, where all countries were supposed to be plugged into that. You're supposed to liberalize your economies to allow for free trade. Where countries can't take advantage of, can't have unfair advantages over others by subsidizing their local economy, getting rid of unions and barriers that allows for penetration. But what happened is that some countries were locked into the agreement, but others were above it, like what we have in society today. Some people feel as though they are above the laws. Prime Minister P.J. Patterson talked about the law is not a shackle. The law is not a shackle. Okay? The law is not a shackle. And some people feel as though it's not a shackle. It's only for some people. It's only for some people and some societies, or certain societies. That's what we're talking about. So here we have agreements. Say, for example, the Caribbean. The Caribbean, they are locked in an agreement where, okay, we can't subsidize our farmers and so on. I'm going to play the video Life and Death that talks about that, this bureaucratic phenomenon. But anyway, so globalization meets this nationalist ideal of the nation. This nationalist ideal of the nation. Fanon writes in Merchant of the Earth, and it is my purpose almost half a century later to ask, what might be saved from Fanon's ethics and politics of decolonization or nationalization to reflect on globalization? Because that's the irony of this freedom that we're talking about. Because there's a conflict here. Countries, here we are having free national. So the point is, post-colonialism provided new freedom with what met with dogmas, because globalization was met for certain rules. WTO created rules that all countries signed to. Okay, so we talk about post-colonialism provided new freedoms met with dogmas, rules, and the bureaucratic phenomenon. Certain rules that Caribbean countries should not have subscribed to, given their size, given their new freedoms, their vulnerabilities. But again, we live in a competitive world. We live in a competitive world. I must continue. According to Umi Baba, it must seem ironic, even absurd at first, the search for association and intersection between decolonization and globalization. And parallels would be pushing the analogy when decolonization had the dream of a third world. Decolonization had the dream of a third world. I hate the word third world. Third world of, but anyway, decolonization had the dream of what? Third world. Decolonization, to decolonize, to decolonize is to what? Is to make free. It's the process to remove control. Colonization is to control. Decolonization is the process of removing controls. Yes? Moving towards independence. So it must seem ironic, even absurd at first, to search for association and intersection between decolonization and globalization. Parallels would be pushing the analogy when decolonization had the dream of a third world of free post-colonial nations firmly on its horizon, whereas globalization gazes at the nation through the back mirror as it speeds towards the strategic nationalization of state sovereignty. It speeds towards the strategic denationalization of state sovereignty. This is quite interesting. So globalization does what? It does the opposite of what these nationalist people at the Bandung Conference wanted or thought about. Decolonization and independence is opposite and clashes with globalization, because globalization gazes at the nation through the back mirror. Because globalization and neoliberal globalization speeds towards what? It speeds towards the strategic denationalization of state sovereignty. Globalization opposes state sovereignty, but these nationalists, these people looking for an independent nation in the 1950s and so on, they are looking for a third world nation that was national, that was independent and sovereign. But little did they know what was happening. Globalization is about to happen, and globalization, in a sense, gazes at the nation through the back mirror, in a sense, because because globalization is speeding towards strategic denationalization, pulling down barriers, pulling down state sovereignty. It involves opening penetration. Okay, denationalization of state sovereignty. So here is it that they are trying to create sovereign states, but here they are met in a world that's now becoming global, which opposes state sovereignty. But yet globalization is still about still appreciates sovereignty in a sense, because we talk about neoliberal globalization, because some countries stand to gain more out of globalization that we have. So yes, so we talk about globalization gazes at the idea of the nation and decolonization through its back mirror. Because yes, globalization is about the crossing of the borders. But yet the kind of globalization that seeks towards denationalization of sovereign states is one where some countries still was operating based on what is in its own interest and to become the best and to be the best. And there are those who wanted to gain the most out of globalization. So the most powerful countries within a globalized world will still promote its national interests, but those weak countries were more open and penetratable. So this is a powerful point. Talk about the irony of globalization, of independence. But the point I'm making again, post-colonialism provided new freedoms met with dogmas, rules, and the bureaucratic phenomenon. And again, Franz Fanon talks about the colonized man is a political creature, is today a political creature in every sense of the word. So therefore, yes, the, the, the colonized, underdeveloped man is today a political creature in the global sense of the word, because of this irony of denationalization, which meets globalization, the neoliberal globalization, where the post-colonialism provided new dogmas met with rules, provided new freedom met with rules and dogmas and the bureaucratic phenomenon. So those are some of the things that you may want to consider. Now, one of the questions that was raised from the video that we played from what, as we talk about the Black Jacobins, C.L.R. James wrote from Trinidad, wrote the book about Haiti. Isn't that interesting? Here we have a Haitian writing a book about, a Trinidadian writing a book about Haiti to show how connected the region is and how passionate we are about each other's. I don't know if we're passionate now, but how passionate. I mean, there was a time when Jamaicans were opposed to Haitians coming to the border. Yet still we were looking to go out of the country. But anyways, there was a point I want to push back a little bit about. I want to push back and I want to critique C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins. I want to critique this analysis. There are people who glorify, okay, Haiti is the first country, Haiti is the first country to get independent, colonized country to get independence. So had the first successful slave revolt in Haiti. Haiti had the first successful slave revolt and the only successful slave revolt. Didn't declare independence. But was it successful? No, was it successful? That's my question. Because Haiti today is still struggling. Haiti today is still struggling with independence. In fact, we have a petition right now that's ongoing talking about advocating for the Haitian, advocating for a Haitian-led solution to their crisis, because right now they do not have a democratic nation. They have a nation who is led who is governed by someone who is installed by people outside of Haiti, led by a group of countries that govern Haiti: Brazil, Canada, to some extent France, and the US. Okay? So, and not only that, then when you start to delve into Haitian history, you say that, well, they got independence, but their independence their independence wasn't recognized internationally. France didn't recognize it. Of course, France would not recognize their independence when they got it in 1803 or 1804. The US didn't recognize their independence. The UK, nobody recognized their independence. And of course, it was not it would not have been in the interest of these other powerful countries to recognize their independence anyways, because it would then send a message to other countries. It would provide the fuel for other slave revolts. So of course they wouldn't do that. Haiti, and of course, and France forced Haiti to pay millions or billions of dollars, what it was, billions of dollars then. I think 90 billion or something like that, 94 million. But it's somewhere I did a class talking about this. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was millions of dollars. At that time, it would be considered billions. But Haiti was forced to pay millions of dollars, which created a debt. Okay, a debt. They had to pay this debt in order for their freedoms to, so yes, they were free, but they weren't really free because it wasn't until they were able to pay off this debt to France before their independence was recognized. Not until about what, in the 1900s, 1940s or thereabout, that Haiti was able to pay the debt to France, to finish pay the debt. But for years they were indebted to France, and of course, and for years there was penetration from the U.S. and other international countries into and peoples in the international regime into Haiti, and even up to today, Haiti is struggling. So of course you wonder, is what's there to celebrate about Haiti, you may ask, based on what's going on in Haiti today? Were they really free? But there was a question stemming from this video, because from the book Jacobins, I think the book answers the question: how were these uneducated slaves, unassuming slaves, how were they able to beat Napoleon and the French? Because at the time, Napoleon and the French, they were considered one of the most powerful armies. How were they able to beat? How was Oliver Toussaint? How was he able to lead such a revolt? Of course, it started from Dottie Boukman, who came from Jamaica, who was a slave who came to Jamaica from where? From Senegambia. And of course, CLR James answered the question, and I like his answer. And I'm gonna before I play this other. Actually, maybe because I want to talk about CLR James because he answered the question. Since the question is asked, let's answer it. How is it that these unassuming slaves, this group, how are they able to successfully beat Napoleon and the French? At the time, they were like the U.S. They had their army was the juggernaut of Europe and the world. How is it that these Haitians were able to do that? And by the way, after Haiti got their independence, please remember that they also had elites. Part of what has helped to dog the Caribbean is that some of these, when they got their independence and their freedoms, they did the same thing that their colonizers did. Okay, they developed an elite class who continue to profit at the expense of their peoples. In fact, at one point, Haiti had dominated and colonized DR, Dominican Republic. And that is why, even up to today, there is bad blood or a chasm between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, because you say, why is it that why is it that they don't help the people in Haiti? But the Haitians at one time had dominated and colonized Haiti had the Dominican Republic and even lived there briefly. And they had to seek the help of, was it Spain and the Europeans? They successfully took back their country and killed off some of the Haitians and declared that they weren't Africans or black anymore. They considered themselves white. That's in the Dominican Republic. That happened. Just so you know, so Haiti at some point they had made missteps, and you wonder, well, has that also affected their experience today? The fact that what they had done to their neighbors, it's quite interesting. But how were they able to defeat them? Napoleon, Oliver Toussaint, and the Haitians, these unassuming slaves. How that's not possible. And of course, what part of the answer that CLR gives is that he talks about how the slaves were educated. The slaves who came from Africa were, and I've said that before, were among the best and the brightest. The slaves who came from Africa, they were among the best and the brightest. And I said to you earlier, pian pian people, that's a Jamaican word. Pian pian people. There is a pian pian people couldn't survive the transatlantic. and they wanted the smartest. Okay, we said that people like Dottie Bookman. Dottie Bookman was versed in Quran and several other languages, and some of them quickly learned the languages of the Europeans, and they were easily and the Europeans wanted the best and the brightest and people who were skilled in doing the kind of project that they were about to do, which was they were going to develop a sugar plantation and people had, and the kind of labor that they wanted was a labor that was willing and easy to learn the skills and the techniques of sugar plantation and the kind of agriculture, and they quickly learned it. So it talks about the education of the slave. We talk about reimagining peoples, or black and brown people within critical race theory, moving away from victim, seeing them as hero, and they were valuable. So yes, and so even despite the attempts to bring these slaves to the New World and to mix them up. You don't put them in the same tribe, you mix them in different tribes so that they can't communicate. Okay? They couldn't sing, they couldn't, and so on and so forth. Limit the communication. So as to mitigate any resistance. But the fact that they were still able to come and coalesce and to organize, and they quickly learned plantation technology and skills and technique, quickly learned it. So that Haiti became the pearl of the Caribbean at one point. In fact, Haiti was one of the best and most unique and precious colony to the French. It was a very important port, very important colony. And so it was within their interest to keep it. So the fact that Oliver Toussaint and these slaves were able to successfully beat them and take control, that's quite interesting. Because this is one place they didn't want to lose. But part of it is to be complete, remember that they had an elite core. The elite, they also participated. They saw that, well, the slave revolt is also going to benefit them. The elite, which part of them were mulattoes, part of them were Anglo-Saxons or white people, but some of them also supported the slave revolt and all in a sense, and nobody's talking about that really. But when you start to when you start to read Jacobins, he alludes to that, C.L. Adrian, but he doesn't go. But so all those factors, and you look at and I talk about how they learned from we talk about the French Revolution and the American Revolution and the elites in the and how it was within their interest to take control of the wealth of America instead of sending it all back to Britain. And so in the elites in these Caribbean countries, in Haiti particularly, saw that this would have benefited them as well. So it's so you ask the question, how were they able to, these undereducated, unassuming, poor black slaves, how were they able to beat the French? That's part of the narrative. And I'm going to play a tape from C.L. Adrian. There was an interview with C.L. Adrian. I'm going to talk about it a little bit because he makes a very important comparison in terms of the revolution and the resistance movement towards nationalism in the Caribbean and what defines it. Okay, but before I get into that, I'm going to continue the video, and then we take a quick break, and then we go into and I want to quickly talk about the homework that you guys did. Okay, so let's go into the second part, which is not long. It's about 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. In 1492 CE, Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and landed in the Americas. He and his men were the first to wash up in the Bahamas, Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and eastern Cuba. From Europe to do from so. Europe. They weren't the first to do so, but they weren't the first to wash up there. Not the first. But however, on their return to Spain, he and his brother Bartholomew later returned to the Americas and identified Hispaniola's land and indigenous people as potentially profitable for the Spanish crown. Bartholomew estimated about 1.1 million people lived on Hispaniola, but modern scholars have generally used the range of 250,000 to 1 million people. However, the actual Caribbean Aboriginal population is now known based on a new Caribbean DNA study published in the journal Nature, which fuses decades of archaeological work with cutting-edge genetic technology. And this breakthrough study shows that the local population before the arrival of the Spanish was much lower and far less heterogeneous than thought. That is from Critical Thinking. Caribbean DNA study challenges Spanish assumptions. Professor David Reich of the Harvard Medical School led a team of researchers who analyzed the genomes of 263 individuals, representing the largest ever study of ancient human DNA in the Americas. The Caribbean DNA study concluded that the Caribbean had been settled by two major migratory waves of highly mobile people separated by thousands of years. I gotta pause for a quick second. What we know of the Aboriginal people that lived in the Caribbean prior to the arrival of the Europeans and the Spanish is what is told by the Europeans who arrived here. It's what is told by the Spanish who arrived here. What we have is their accounts. But now their accounts are being challenged. And that is important. Their accounts are being challenged. And that is why you have people like the UIHS, the Urban Indian Heritage Society. I actually spoke with one of the founders and the president earlier today about coming back to give us an update. I said to you guys they were going to be here this week, but I decided against it. I didn't reach out. I decided against that because I had some other things. Plus, I've already had them on the. I had a video with them before that you guys can go back and watch, but I still have them at some point. But I decided against it because I wanted to get into this quickly with you guys. But it's important to note that what we know. So, but now people are studies. I know. Now people are doing. No researchers are finding new evidence that challenges what we know and what was written about the Aboriginal people. In fact, based on these newfound research, we have to even go deeper. We have to even go deeper to now look at how is it that the Caribbean was, where these people come from, how is it that they were there, and so on and so forth. But this is quite interesting. But let's continue with what I'm saying here. Let's go back a bit and continue. Which fuses decades of archaeological work with cutting-edge genetic technology. And this breakthrough study shows that the local population before the arrival of the Spanish was much lower and far less heterogeneous than thought. That is from Critical Thinking. Caribbean DNA study challenges Spanish assumptions. Professor David Reich of the Harvard Medical School led a team of researchers who analyzed the genomes of 263 individuals, representing the largest ever study of ancient human DNA in the Americas. The Caribbean DNA study concluded that the Caribbean had been settled by two major migratory waves of highly mobile people separated by thousands of years. However, according to an article by the Florida Museum of Natural History, on their way to this conclusion, the researchers developed a new genetic technique for estimating the island's past population size prior to the first Spanish landings. This is quite important. Now, when the first Europeans arrived, the number of people living in the Caribbean was far. The study looks at population size. But the study mentions that people came to the Caribbean from thousands of years ago based on migratory patterns. I am interested in that study, not necessarily but this particular presentation more talks about, it touches on that, but it talks about the size of the Caribbean of these people. But what is important is this: when you start to study Caribbean roots and the fact that the Caribbean, what we were before the arrival of Europe and the slaves, and who lived here, but the fact that they came and how they came here, migratory patterns, and later you're going to hear probably some of farmers and so on washed up on the shores and so on. But migratory patterns from where? From all over the world, from Africa, the Ottoman Empire, and when you start to study their crafts and so on and so forth and the writings, then you start to see African influences and similarities. Then you start to ask the question: were these people, the people that part of the migratory pattern, some of the currents that they come all the way from Africa as well? And you see, and that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting to study. Smaller than 1.1 million, reported by Columbus's brother Bartholomew. Professor of Archaeology William Keegan from the Florida Museum of Natural History was co-senior author of the new study, and he told the New York Times that this study of ancient DNA moves the academic understanding of the Caribbean's history forward dramatically in one fell swoop. Two ancient waves of Caribbean DNA. The new genetic evidence offers insights into the early people of the Caribbean and suggests that the island's first inhabitants were a group of stone tool users who had boated to Cuba about 6,000 years ago. Now, these first inhabitants expanded eastward and populated other smaller islands during the region's Archaic Age. The study determined that they had closer genetic links with people from Central and South America compared to the ancient DNA from North American Indian cultures, and further cementing this origins story. Now, artifacts found in Belize and Cuba also suggest they had a Central American origin. The second ancient pathway into the Caribbean was forged 2,500 to 3,000 years ago by groups of migrating farmers. The paper says these people were related to the Arawak speakers of Northeast or South America, who had paddled the fingers of South America's Orinoco River basin from the... Okay, let me pause here just for a second. This is a very important point I'm about to make. Very important point. These people came, who came... This is quite interesting, is it not? The Caribbean. And they talk about how the people come from Central, and how the people in Central America, Latin America came to the Caribbean, and not necessarily having much reverence to people in North America, but it's still there. But yet later on, there was, because of travel that existed, and they say it seemed to be some kind of diversity in the Caribbean. There are some who challenge whether or not they were intermingling. They traveled in their groups. But what is quite interesting is that when you start to study the cultures of these people, of these early people, the Aboriginal people in the Caribbean, and you start to look at how they come to the Caribbean through migratory waves and patterns. And then you start to study their crafts and their artifacts and their religion. Now, we were taught that they never had religion, but yes, they had religion, or certain traditions that embrace ancestral spirits and ancestral worship, and how these are represented in their carvings, in their worship of the stone and the sun. And then you start to study the religions of the Africans, and even the Africans that came there. And even in voodoo religions and Obeah religions and Afro-Caribbean traditions and beliefs, you find also this ancestral worship. The importance of appealing to the ancestors for protection. That is important. You find that the kind of similarity, then you start to make connection to see how these people, where these people come from. You start to trace them to see the connections that the Caribbean people have, how the Aboriginal and their connections with Africa and with African DNA, or African history, African traditions, African religions, and how these people that came to wash up on the islands, how they were able to preserve that. But that's quite interesting and powerful. Okay, but let's continue. The interior to coastal Venezuela, then northward into the Caribbean Sea. After settling on Puerto Rico, these explorers traveled westward, beginning the region's ceramic age, which is defined by these farmers' agricultural methods and style of pottery. Now, the New Caribbean DNA study also relied on ceramic evidence. Before this new study was published, there had always been unclarity regarding the various styles of pottery discovered in the Caribbean, each of which was associated with later migration waves. However, the newly gained genetic information finally determines that all the fragments of ancient pottery found in the region were created by one group of people over time. Another aspect of the study analyzed the X chromosomes from 19 pairs of genetic cousins who had all lived on different islands but were separated by several generations. For example, the DNA from a man buried in the Bahamas was matched with another man discovered 600 miles away in the Dominican Republic, according to the paper. Dr. Reich wrote that there's such a finding. By the way, I'm gonna pause right there to suggest this. It is not difficult. They didn't have the ease of mobility. They never had the ease of mobility. The people in the islands at the time, these people, they never had the ease of mobility. So yes, you can find that one man was related to another person 600 years, but it shows how the travel was active. And I said that in the last class. The people of the Caribbean, they were actively traveling. And many of these, and they washed up on the islands. And by the way, the narrative begins by saying that Christopher Columbus were the first people to have washed up on the islands. But then later on talk about other people mobile people who were washed up on the island, mobile farmers who came and traveled all along the island. So that's a contradiction right there, okay? But it is quite interesting as we talk about the importance of. So I said it's a contradiction. Let me say it to flesh it out some more. It's a contradiction because Christopher Columbus this particular presentation contradicts itself. Christopher Columbus was not the first to have washed up there, because people have been coming from 6,000 years. There's evidence that 6,000 years ago people have been coming. So Christopher Columbus wasn't the first, and people have been traveling. So that much we know. Let's wrap up this quickly. Rethinking our heritage and studying our heritage and our roots, and questioning whether or not we have misunderstood our heritage. And now we're hearing that what we thought about the Spanish DNA is completely different. Now new studies researchers are finding some different evidence that's suggesting something different and something new as it relates to how the people of the Caribbean were closely connected, although they were separate. But they were. All right, we stop there. Let me stop share my screen. All right. Okay, great. Hi guys, welcome to the class. Hi, how is everybody doing? How are you guys? Welcome. How are you? Renee, Alisa, Davion, Chanel, Jessica is not here. I wonder why Jessica is not here. Yeah, man, good to see you guys. How are you guys doing so far though? How are you guys doing so far? You guys are good?
Yes, sir, I'm okay.
Great. Alright, so last week you guys were supposed to do an interaction. I didn't check to see if you guys submitted that. I'll check later on. And secondly, you guys were supposed to also start thinking about tracing your heritage and provide a reflection paper that looks at your heritage. I'm interested to find out what you guys come up with. And so we want to spend some time to discuss that. So let's start with who wants to go first. Maybe I should go. In terms of my heritage, is traced. I think my great grandmother. Well, my great grandmother. My grandfather was born in Cuba. To my great grandfather, who is a white man from Scotland, who was visiting Cuba at the time and met my great grandmother. This is my father's side. Met my great grandmother, who is Jamaican, who was in Cuba at the time. So of course you know that there was a lot of travel was going on for the Caribbean. And then at some point they had several children, several boys. I heard they had about 6 kids. Some of them during the Cuban War, many of my family, this is the story that was told me, they escaped in a banana boat back and came to Jamaica. And of course, that's my father's side. I don't know anything that of course, in terms of my great grandfather, I don't know anything beyond the fact that my great grandfather from Scotland. I don't know what happened. I don't know his family. My great grandmother, not much is known or told about. I don't know what happened. I don't know who she connected to. I don't know where she's from in terms of Jamaica. All I know is that she was in Jamaica, and I don't know anything about. I don't know beyond that. I don't know. On my mom's side, I know that my mom's father was a mulatto, and his father was from Ireland, and he was white. And I don't know anything about his mom. My mom is actually, yeah, my great grandmother. I don't know much about her actually. But on my mom's side, my mom's my grandmother, who lived until she was 104. I did have a conversation with her many years ago about our heritage. Thank God I was able to do that before she died. And she talked about hailing from the Maroons. In fact, a lot of my family lived in Constitution Hill, and a lot of them are related, I realize. And I really haven't. I still need to do more research actually about my family side. But I know there are some on my mom's side. My mom's mom, her mom was a Maroon, and that much I know. And I haven't done much study. Where in the but from St. Andrew, in the hills of St. Andrew. They lived in the hills of St. Andrew, close to Constitution Hill. But she left the Maroons and came down and married my mom's father. So I don't know much about it beyond that in terms of what existed before that. I don't think I have done much research, which I plan to do. But okay, what about you guys? What did you guys find?
Um, as it relates to my parents, I don't know much about my great grandmother from my great grandparents from my mother's side because they died before I was born.
Okay.
Um, my my mother's parents, I guess they're still up and living. They I guess they're mostly African or from that descent. In terms of what call it, ancestry, deep
Yeah.
research into the ancestry, I am not sure how that goes. But as far as I know, they said that what call it, I they originated from Africa. Their descendants from Africa. Um, and then from my father's side, his family is in Westmoreland.
Okay.
Yeah, and his parents are deceased,
Okay.
so there's not much I can find out about that. Even if they weren't deceased, they're a bit estranged.
Yeah.
So yeah, and his mother, the last time I saw her, she's of light complexion, and her hair is somewhat of native traits are
Oh.
mixed, and what call it? And his father is African, of African descent. I heard that my mother's grandmother, or great great grandmother, somewhere up there, was
Yeah.
also of light complexion, and her hair color was like mixed as well. So I got the light complexion and a bit light complexion, not too dark, not too brown. Um, and so did my sister. But the
Okay.
rest of us mostly dark skin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, who did you where did you find the information? Who did you talk to? Your who did you talk to?
My mom and
Okay.
my grandmother from my
Okay.
mother's side.
Was it easy for you to get the information from them?
I guess based on their memories, it
Yeah.
was fairly easy. And then if I were to research, my last name is what do you call it? Irish descent, so I'm not really sure.
Okay.
But yeah,
How far back can you think they were able to go? Were they able to go trace relatives from as far as in slavery or maroon or whatever?
no, sir, we don't have that privilege of tracing them way back then. It's just what we know now.
Why do
Who
you
we are
think so?
able to talk to now.
Why
Um,
why why do you think that's the case?
I guess in order to trace it back, you would have to do a deep dive,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's something that they have really thought about. Probably it was a thought that just like popped up once in a while, but like I don't think they were that curious to
Yeah.
search about where they came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Gavion.
Yeah.
Who wants to go next? Who wants to go next?
I could go.
Alicia, go ahead.
Okay. So mine is, I can trace mine back to my great great grandparents.
Okay.
But this is only from the maternal side. I don't have any information from the paternal side. It's just speculation. Uh, so no, you know how
Wait,
like
why
you
is
look
it
at people,
speculation?
like
Why
you
is
look
it
at people,
yeah.
and we're like, yeah, man, them look like them mixed with that. It's
Okay.
literally it's just that's it. Uh,
Yes. Okay.
right. So from the maternal side, my great, or I'll say it this way. My great grandmother's father was a Scottish plantation owner.
Okay.
And we were able, the last name is Tullow. So we were
In
able to,
Jamaica? in Jamaica?
What do you mean?
I mean, you said your great the plantation owner from Scotland. What did he live in?
Oh,
He
yeah,
lived in.
yeah, yeah. He was a plantation owner in Jamaica, from what
Okay.
I was told.
Yes.
Because that was also something interesting I learned. It wasn't the British alone who owned plantations. The Scots also owned plantations too.
You
I
see,
don't
oh,
know.
it's why it's so important to do this.
Yeah,
That's good. Yes.
right. So that would be great grandfather. So he was a Scottish plantation owner. And so my great grandmother's mother now, she was half black and half Indian. But her Indian, from what we think, it's not any native Indian type of thing. She would have probably been among the indentured laborers
Yeah.
that came in. So she is black white Indian. Uh
Okay.
then in terms of now her children, well, I'm balancing it with my great grandmother. So now she would have married my great grandfather, and that man is like we joke and we're like, that man is blackity black black. Ain't no that man. He is
Yes.
straight up black. But the last name is Simpson.
Yes. Ah.
So you know that then if he has that name, it would be linked to probably a British plantation based on the fact
Yeah.
that the name is Simpson. But we don't know. So since I mentioned that in terms of Africa, we know that when you look across my family, you see that it's predominantly an African persons are of African descent. That is the strongest identifier. But we can't say which countries in Africa, and we can't
Okay.
say, and I know you tell us not to use the word tribe, but I don't have the other word for it. So in
Oh.
terms of that cultural breakdown, we don't know countries
Peoples.
and we don't know,
People. Let's say peoples.
okay, we don't know which of the people groups or
Yeah.
languages, and we don't have any of that information at all. So that's
Okay.
gonna have to come from ancestry.com or one of those places.
Or the
Uh,
Urban Indian Heritage Society. Check them out too.
oh, okay.
UIHS.org. And I think they're doing some study in Jamaica and the Caribbean in terms of linking Indians and urban Indians heritage in the Caribbean. So you probably might want to do some go on their website and reach out to them. In fact, I've asked them, I'm trying to get them back to the class. So if they could come back, you guys can have and they can have a discussion with you guys and so on. They're kind of interesting study.
Okay, thank you. I wrote it down. Okay. So in terms of their children now, um, so these would have been my grands no, grand aunties and grandmother. Grand
Yes.
aunties, grand uncles, and grandmother. Half of them, all of them got that mixed race hair texture from my great grandmother. But in terms of complexion, it was seven of them. The first half got the father's dark skin, and the
Yeah.
second half got my great grandmother's fairer skin color.
Okay.
And that would have included my grandmother, who was the last one. Now, in terms of my grandmother, and this is now how my mother comes onto the scene. My grandmother would have come from that mix that I would
Yeah.
have mentioned before. My grandfather now, he is a full white man, and from what we believe in terms of what was most obvious,
Yeah.
he is of Syrian descent
Mm.
as well as German descent, so proper white man.
Yes.
But what is interesting then in terms of what we learned is that it's not then just a European and it's not even just a West Africa ancestry, but it's also a Northern Africa ancestry in terms of Syria's location.
Yeah.
And then, really, Matthew? Okay, fine. Just saying, all I meant was that all I
Thank you for that, Alan.
man don't mix with black. The man don't
Uh-huh.
mix with black. 'Cause you know, Jamaican people call people who fear white.
Yes, that is true.
Right. So no, I mean him not black. Him not have no black in him. That's what I'm saying.
Uh,
Okay. So what is interesting though is that so his last name is Magnus. Now that
okay.
Magnus line, because I have my mommy's last name, I can trace that back centuries. So I remember going to, and some of it I didn't need to ask, some of it would have been through my experience. So I remember going to the mosque, Jewish, not mosque, the Jewish synagogue downtown.
Yeah.
The name Samuel Magnus was listed among their like people in the Jewish history and going back to the 1500s.
Yes.
We were able to trace the name to Albertus Magnus, and there's a school called Albertus Magnus College, which is at
Yeah.
Catholic University in Connecticut. That the Magnuses have like is a family like with their own crest and that sort of thing. And
Yes.
what I also found, which is interesting, because I've seen attachments to it in Germany, but what I found when I looked it up is that Magnus is a popular name throughout Scandinavia and was first introduced to the region by the Norwegian King Magnus the First.
Oh, okay. So you must have some relations to Magnus the First.
No, because they said that they said that, well, I know certainly in the Jamaican context, all of us are related.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to doing the further research to get how it all works out. But
Yeah.
in terms of family features, my mother, she not have no Simpson in her. You would never know. You'd probably think she's adopted. She looks
Yes.
like her father.
Yes.
She has her father's features to the extent that people have confused her overseas to be something other than Jamaican. So, for instance, when 9/11 happened, she had to travel a few months later and she was pulled out to be searched. And what saved her was her Jamaican passport because of how she looked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
So, in terms of my father's side, no, that's a speculation. Everybody's like, him look like him could have mixed with Indian and him look like him could have mixed with Chinese, but we don't know.
Oh, wow.
But
Quite.
in terms of me, I look like the Magnuses. So I don't look like a Simpson. I don't look like my father's side. I look
Yeah.
like Magnus. But no one is confusing me with anything but black.
Yes. Yes. Quite interesting. Rich. The Germans have a rich. The Germans came to Jamaica as well. I think they were in, especially Saint Elizabeth. There, I think in Saint Elizabeth, I believe that at one point the Germans had populated Saint Elizabeth, and even throughout Jamaica, find a lot of German artifacts, German influences.
And that is interesting that you should say that because a lady asked me the other day if my family come from St. Elizabeth because of how I look.
Oh,
And I was
wow!
like, no.
Yes, yes, Saint Elizabeth. I learned about Saint Elizabeth and the German influence in Jamaica, and even where I live in Germany, sorry, where I live in Germantown. Lot of German influence here. Boy, the Germans were everywhere, it seems. And not only that, but also the Jews lived in Germany one time, and after World War I and World War I and II, and with the Holocaust and so on, and the persecution, they fled and went all over the world. Some of the Germans came here, but also some of the Jews that lived in Germany came to Jamaica. And you're talking about,
Wow.
yes, yes,
I didn't know that.
yes, yeah, man. So it's quite interesting, especially since in 1914 thereabout up to the 1944. There would have been a lot of travel. So it's quite interesting, right? It's powerful. All right, who wants to go next? Feldman is having problem with his computer, so probably he should go next because we may lose him at any time. Feldman, Feldman,
Yeah,
do you want
sir.
do you
Good
want to go
evening. Good
next?
evening, everyone.
Good evening. Do you want to go next? Because we may lose you at any minute, the way you are going in and out.
I'm still driving, and that's what has been happening, and I'm sorry about that.
When do you stop driving?
In terms of, pardon me?
When do you stop driving?
Go again, sir.
No, how
When will
much
I
more?
stop driving? In
Yeah,
maybe in
when
the next
30 minutes?
30 minutes or less.
Oh,
I'm
by the
heading
time.
home. I'm almost home now.
Okay, but okay, go ahead though.
By the time class done.
All right, well, go ahead. Because by the time you get home, the class
Uh,
is wrapping up. But go ahead.
I'm going to stop and answer the question because I'm going to go through what they asked. So, we're pulling off the road.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, the question is in regarding my genealogy, right?
Yeah. How far can you
Hello, are you
go?
hearing me? Okay.
Yes. How far can you trace it? What's your heritage? What's your roots? Yes.
Well, the challenge I have is that when I was born, all my grandparents were already dead at least 5, 10 years in some parts already. But
Okay.
from what I was told with regards to my father's lineage, is
Mm-hmm.
that his father was a Syrian, was a
Okay.
Syrian.
Uh-huh.
His last name being Rose. I am told that the Rose, there was two sets, two gentlemen who came in the island with the last name, one being white or Syrian, and the other was a black man. But I am from the set that is considered Syrian or white.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the my mother's side of family is the Taylors. I knew all my uncles and stuff, but that's as far as I am. I'm told they my so and to find out all of this information, I had to ask my aunt, my sisters that are by my father's side. My father has he's now deceased. Four
Okay.
kids, three girls, I'm the only son. There's not much per se in terms of where the origin of the rose came from. No, I'm still not able to decipher where exactly they're
Okay.
from. So I didn't get much per se from my family. I learned last year that because I originally thought that, like my father, was the only son, because they have the tendency of calling me one son,
Yeah.
thinking that because my father only got one son, and I thought it was the same for him. Well, only to learn that I actually have at least two uncles and
Yeah.
a few more aunts that I was never aware of, was never made aware of. So, information still keep unfolding.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, that's pretty much what I have, unless I'm
Wow.
missing something.
It's quite interesting when I'm so doing this study, doing I just this is the third class I'm doing that. When I just started teaching this, I never really gave it as a home as an assignment. I saw that it was an assignment for the students to go and do visit a site and stuff. But then after I learned about new research about looking at American Afro Americans in the Caribbean and in the Americas, their heritage and how people have been misclassified. I started asking the students to do research about their own heritage and lineage. Even I started doing it. I mean, I had done it before, but I didn't really go deep into it to really trace, and I still haven't gone deep enough, say for example, done, and I really don't want to do an ancestry.com study because ancestry.com is limited in terms of the philosophy and the methodology they use. They use philosophies and methodologies that is informed by a Eurocentric approach and assumptions about Africans and so on. So I want it to be done by people in the subaltern. So I still have to do that. So I'm talking with UIHS to get it done. I still have to do more research with my grandparents. Well, no, my grandparents aren't alive. So, but I have my uncle is alive. So I still have more digging to do. So for me, but what I've noticed is that it's just the black families is just you can't go. It's as if you cannot. There's some kind you can't go far. The thread is tangled. This the this tangle. There's a cut in the thread in black families. Quite interesting. But anyways, who wants to go next?
Wait, sir, after the next person goes, or after we finish this section, based on what you just said, I want to ask a question, please.
Yeah, go. Yes, definitely. So Renee or Alan, you're next.
So I can go.
Okay.
My on my my grandmother's father, Tavares, he's from Portugal. I believe my wife, when she was doing her ancestry dating thing, I believe she found it's more important to her than myself. So she found the ticket of him coming to Jamaica.
When was this?
This should have been early 90s, sir. My great grandfather.
Oh wow. That's
And he married a Jamaican, Mary Lou, I believe is her name. Tavares would have been her last name. I don't know. She's a black woman. I don't know
I
where
don't mean to laugh, but those names are just quite
Yes,
interesting.
man.
Mary Lou, okay, yeah, man.
Yeah, so my following through my grandmother is the result of that. My grandfather, he's a black man.
Hmm.
I'm not sure where his family's from, but he's a black man, but with black man with nice hair. So I don't know
What do you
if
mean
there's
nice here? What's this
like,
nice
like,
here?
like
I
a
would
soft hair, sir, like myself.
nice hair, ugly
Okay.
hair.
Like yeah, like it's not coarse hair, sir. So
Yes, yeah,
but he's a black man.
yeah.
So I just don't know if I don't know the genes that's coming through there. So
Yeah.
um right. Now on my father's side, my grandmother is from China. She's Chinese. And got
Hmm.
married to a gentleman that's mixed. I don't know mixed with what, but he was from Saint Elizabeth, um, and the result was my father, and I don't know anything beyond my grandmother, my father's side. I don't know much about that side of the family. 'Cause the divorce happened quite early, so I know more about my stepfather's side of the family than anything else. But yeah,
Okay. Oh wow, that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. That's good. What's your last name?
Isaacs,
Isaacs.
yes
And
sir,
that comes from your
my
father's
father,
side.
yes sir.
But you say your father's side is from which side? It's from Portugal, right? Your great
No,
grandfather?
my mother's side is from Portugal. My great grandfather. So actually, known he was alive. They lived until 106.
Oh
So
wow.
yes, so he was very much in our lives up until he passed in the early 2000s. So
Have you been to Portugal?
haven't, no sir.
What? Come on, man. You have
Um,
to go to Portugal, bro.
yes, and he's actually it's funny because he's definitely mixed. But I don't know mixed to what end,
Yeah.
but mixed with white and black, but definitely from Portugal.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Quite
But
interesting. But your father's side now is black, probably with some mixture.
my father's side, grandmother Chinese, his
Okay.
mother is Chinese, and
Your father's side
his
is.
father is mixed with something, black and
If
something. I don't
if
know,
it's
sir.
from Saint Elizabeth, they may have some German influence there because the Germans were in Saint Elizabeth.
Yeah.
This is in, okay. Well, thank you so much for that. And the last, well, Chanel is now in the class. Chanel, you haven't gone yet. Did you go yet? Wait, I see two screens for Chanel.
Yes, sir. I'm at work, so one of I logged in on the work computer, but then I know that you were gonna call me, so I came out and logged in on my phone.
Okay. Well, yes, yeah. I think you are next. Was somebody? Did we lose somebody just now? Wasn't there somebody else? I said who hasn't gone yet? It was Alan and Chanel. Okay, yeah. So Chanel, go ahead.
Okay, sir. So I don't know much about my family because
Hmm.
my family has been carrying on like generational conflict, especially on my father's side. So I don't know much about them. The only thing I know is my grandfather, my paternal grandfather. I know that side is like mostly African because they're all like really, really dark and chapped in. So if you research like how an African man looks, that's exactly how they look.
Okay.
And my grandfather, my paternal grandfather,
Yeah.
he was really wild, so he had a lot of baby mamas. So like his maids and stuff, he had children with them. So that created the conflict amongst my aunt, my paternal aunt. So they don't talk to each other. So this baby mama don't talk to that baby mama. This sister don't talk to that brother. So stuff like that on the father side. But on my mother's side,
Oh, so they look
my
okay. So maybe they are from the Mandingo tradition, huh? Because part of when you study slave society, there was the Mandingo, the a
mhm.
particular slave, those slaves who were tall and big and strong, and their job was to impregnate the women. You know,
Oh,
yes, 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 the Mandingo. So maybe on your father's side, they continue that they still continuation of the Mandingo tradition.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all right, yes. Sorry, on your mother's side now.
Yes, sir. So on my mother's side, my great grandmother, I'm not sure what she is mixed with, but she is light skin. So she's literally red, but she has straight dark Indian hair.
Okay.
And my grandmother, she has straight dark Indian hair, but she is dark. So I'm assuming I've never met her father, which is my great grandfather, but I'm assuming he would have been the dark one because her mother is really light skinned. She's red with long, thick, dark hair, straight dark hair. Sorry. So but person just say Indian or coolie when they're talking to my grandmother.
Any any
And
any maroons in the family? Any maroons? Do you think she's related to the maroons or something in the
I
hill?
don't. I'm not sure because my grandmother don't. She don't even know anything about her side either because she left the family from she was about 13 or so.
Oh wow! So you have a lot of work to do in terms of tracing your lineage and history. Maybe that's a project for you to do in the future.
Yes,
Trace
sir.
family and so on. And as I said, don't just go to ancestry.com, okay?
Mhm.
Because I'm very suspicious of the methodology they use, okay? Try and find any other researches and so on and so forth. But that's quite interesting that so most of us in the class we have some kind of cut in the thread. It's not you can't go as far back. You can't trace it. It's not that clear. By the way, Alicia, are you related to Alan Magnus?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh, I meant to ask and I forgot one day. And Alan, how are you related to him?
Okay, so he would be one of my cousins, but I don't understand how that part works.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So
Oh,
he would
wow,
be
yes.
my cousin. Mm-hmm.
I know you wanted to ask a question you said. What was that?
Okay, I wanted to know how it is possible that even though the slaves are coming from the same place in terms of even those that were taken to the United States, why it
Yeah.
is that the records that were kept for the blacks in the United States is more, or even it even exists then where they can trace their thing generations back, while our grandparents can hardly talk about, like, them get them birth date wrong and them don't have no birth paper, and like, how is that even a thing?
That's a very good question that I can't answer that question. That's a research that you probably should, and that's I can't answer that question, and you are right because since being here in the U.S. and I have access to archives, dating way back to the transatlantic, and people are finding, and so I don't know if that's something that can be done. Maybe that's maybe that's what needs to be done in terms of academic institutions. Yourselves, we need to try, and that's why I started doing this research. And now some of the students are saying, "Sir, I've never done this before. Now I'm finding out things that I didn't." So maybe it's for us now to start you can't, sometimes you can't go to a regular library, and many of the things weren't preserved. But we do have a national museum in Jamaica. So probably there are some things that you can go back and look in history. But say for example, I have a book here. Where is it? The Journal of Negro History. And there's a which I'm telling you, I started reading it. I was amazed. I'm seeing letters from 1848.
Wow.
This book, and I was an old woman when I was living in New York gave this to me when she realized I was doing a research, and she had several of these, and I was trying to get her to give me all of them. From the seven, I have letters. Paul Coff, Paul Coffey by Henry. This is a slave writings, letters. Let me tell you. And I said, wow. And I'm learning this. Wow, where we have letters written by slaves from the 1800s. Wow, and I'm reading it. I am telling you, I was not exposed to this in Jamaica. I was not. And probably you can, maybe some of these, you can find some of them if you go to UE, because now they are dedicating themselves. They are available. Some people, some of these things were burnt, but some of these things are available if you look for it. But you have to go to the National Museum if we have one, or the Jamaica Archive. If you go to the archive, they may have some, but I don't think in terms of academics, a lot of our academics is tailored towards reimagining and exploring our history and so on and so forth. And some of the history is corrupted, so you have to reinvent it yourself. You have to go to the source. You have to do your own history and do the research yourself and do the connections to find things. But they did a very good job of, and you talk about the abolitionist movement in these countries. They did a very good job in preserving some of the history there in terms of them in the US, but in Jamaica and the Caribbean, I'm not sure what was happening there. So that's a good question. That's something that's a good question to ask, and I'm probably going to do some research. The fact that you've asked that very good question, because that's what I do. I do research to find things out. So I'm interested to find out why is it that my students and myself, we can't go far back. But in the US, a lot of people, they can trace their heritage far back to the Cherokee Indians and so on and so forth. People like Kyrie Irving and other people are tracing and finding, and and in the Caribbean, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
And so I know exactly what you're talking about, Alyssa, and it is something that I think I'm going to be doing some further studies. We don't have enough time to do this in this class, but I want to know, and I'm going to do some research on this, to be honest, because I'm noticing this. This is some critical thinking. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to finish class at 6, actually. So, but before we finish, I am going to let me pause my screen real quick, because I'm gonna end the class by going back to a poll that you guys did. Let me see if I could find it. How do we find polls? Okay, there we go, polls. And then let me see, poll 1 question: what are the greatest? Is this it? Compare. Here we go. Here we go. I'm gonna launch this. Launch. All right, I have launched a poll. You guys, we'll be back. I'll be back. We'll be back at 5:45, and I'll see your answers, and we will start to discuss it quickly, and then we'll pick it up when we come back at the next class. The next class, though, I'm just going to do this, finish this, and then I want to show you 2 videos. 1, Who Shot the Sheriff by Bob Marley, and 2, Life and Death. So the next class is just going to be filmed. We're going to do the first 30 minutes, watch this. We're going to finish up this discussion comparing the Caribbean islands. Oh, and there's something else I want to show you guys before you go. So please do not leave class at 6 o'clock, because there's one other video. So do this question right now if you can. What do Haiti and Cuba not have in common with DR, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? Answer the question, and then we'll be back at 5:45.
Wait, sir, we're not seeing the options, only the numbers. Should those of us that did it last time still do it over though?
Yeah, yes, if you can you?
I can't see we're not seeing the choices in terms of the explanation. We're only seeing the numbers.
Okay, hold up. Maybe I need to. Okay, tell you what. End poll. Maybe I need to edit it. Download the view results from the download results relaunch poll. Zero answered. You're not seeing it? I'm not understanding. Relaunch poll. Do not show me. Relaunching the poll will clear existing. Okay, yeah, continue. All right. So tell me if you can see it now. It's
No, no, sir. It's still numbers, just the number options, not the explanation in terms of like the different features of what the islands have.
oh, what do Haiti? Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay, okay. Let me share my screen so you guys have it then, because it's gonna be too much. So let me see Caribbean thought. Ah, here we go. All right, I'm gonna share my screen, and you will have the option right there. Share my screen. Share. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're about to. Okay, welcome back. welcome back. We don't have much time, so let me speed on. So, what do Haiti and Cuba not have in common with DR, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? Three people answered so far. Majority of the people say B as the answer. And B, and if, okay, so I'm going to end it. But.
Sorry, sir. I had my answer, but I didn't read. Apologies.
Okay, what was your answer?
I would have taken, I was going to take in embargoes, no, taking freedom, and the, Lord, my eyesight is failing me.
Is it 1, 4, and 5? Yeah, if you all chose the right answer, so that's very good. Very, very good. Share results. Okay, close this. Good. So, what do Haiti not have in common with DR? Yes. They are the poorest in the world. They took their freedoms. They didn't, the freedoms weren't granted. And of course, 5 embargoes and shaky diplomacy. But what is defining? The defining thing is the taken freedoms. The fact that they took their freedoms has defined their countries and highlighted the difference between Haiti and Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean. Poorest in the world. Yeah, yes, they're the poorest. Black and brown people granted freedoms, taken freedoms, but embargoes, debt, and formerly colonized, all those define all of these countries except taken freedoms. That's very important. So with its vibrant cultures, rich histories, and diverse peoples, the Caribbean region has long been a subject of fascination and study. Within this complex tapestry of Caribbean thought lies a brain teaser, a puzzle that invites contemplation and analysis. This quiz, exploring the nuanced differences among various Caribbean nations, catalyzes deeper reflection on the socio-political landscapes of these countries. At the heart of this brain teaser lies a question. What sets Haiti and Cuba apart from the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? Now, the options presented delve into a myriad of factors, from economic status to historical legacies, shedding light on the unique trajectories of these nations. Now, upon closer examination, the correct answer, as I said, is 1, 4, and 5. And this selection illuminates key distinctions between Haiti, Cuba, and their counterparts. Firstly, Haiti and Cuba are the poorest nations in the Caribbean, grappling with economic challenges, exacerbated by external pressures such as embargoes and diplomatic complexities. Unlike their counterparts who have experienced varying degrees of economic stability, Haiti and Cuba find themselves ensnared in a cycle of poverty and dependency. Secondly, the notion of granted freedoms versus taken freedoms emerges as a pivotal theme. While countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados have navigated the complexities of post-colonial governance and attained a degree of political autonomy, Haiti and Cuba have a tumultuous history of fighting for their independence. Yet, despite their efforts to chart their own destinies, they remain ensnared in geopolitical struggles, their sovereignty undermined by external interventions. The kind of country that Jamaica, Trinidad, and they have what I call negotiated freedoms, negotiated independence. One that where they negotiated the independence on the terms of the former masters, which still continued the kind of politics and so on and so forth that we have. But I say to you guys, if we had done the route of Haiti and Cuba, it would not have been maybe we would have been going through having the same difficulties in terms of the kind of the country that we have today. Thirdly, embargoes, shaky diplomacy and international relations serves as a formidable barrier, or serves as formidable barriers to progress for Haiti and Cuba. Their counterparts who have forged diplomatic alliances and pursued avenues of economic growth. Haiti and Cuba find themselves marginalized on the global stage, grappling with the repercussions of contentious international policies. If Haiti and Cuba got independence on their own terms and were doing very well, it would propel other countries to do the same, and it would create the kind of competition that the former masses that they are not looking for, especially those within the region and internationally. Especially we're moving towards globalization. There are people who want to protect their advantages, and if these countries decide to go it alone and to become competitive, then it threatens the status quo. It would threaten the post-industrial countries or the former mass or the advantages and the gains that they already have. The crux of the matter lies in understanding the complexities of Caribbean thought and the diverse experiences of its constituent nations. While some countries have flourished in the wake of independence, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm not going to use the word flourish. Some countries have had marginal gains or complex trajectories in the wake of independence. That's the word, not flourish. Okay, complex trajectories in the wake of independence. Others continue to grapple with the legacies of colonialism and external interference. Haiti and Cuba stand as poignant reminders of the enduring struggles for sovereignty and self-determination in the Caribbean. Their stories emblematic of the broader themes of resilience and resistance that define the region. In summary, the brain teaser posed serves as a gateway to deeper insights into Caribbean thought, prompting critical reflections on the historical, political, and economic dimensions of the region. By unraveling the complexities of Haiti and Cuba's experiences, we gain a deeper appreciation for the multifaceted nature of Caribbean identity and the enduring legacies that shape its trajectory. So as we navigate the intricate web of Caribbean thought, we have to heed the lessons of the past and strive toward a future defined by solidarity, equity, and empowerment for all nations within the Caribbean mosaic. And I will stop right there. It's now 5:53. We only have 7 minutes. One of the things I wanted to do was, do I have it? Is this it? I want to provide you guys with timeline. Is this it? Caribbean thoughts? No, but this must be it. I want to provide I did a lecture. Oh wow. Okay, give me a second. Trying to find the document. Hold on. You guys are seeing my screen. My screen? I want to what I want to do now. I want to explore the islands of the Caribbean. And that particular brain teaser was supposed to move us into looking comparatively at the Caribbean briefly, looking at the various islands. And so the question is, as we move into this particular lecture, we will begin next week. So we end here. What distinguishes Haiti and Cuba from the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? Please answer and provide a brief synopsis of these islands, their socio-political economy, religions, demographics, and histories, and their current position today. Haiti. So what I would be, so next week I'll begin to talk about this particular issue. What it is that defines them, looking at their religion, looking at the demographics. So we're going to look at Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere with a struggling economy, primarily based on agriculture, particularly subsistence farming. It faces challenges such as political instability, corruption, and natural disasters. And of course, in terms of their religion, the most Haitians practice Catholicism, blended with traditional African religions known as Voodoo, which at one of the class we'll talk about Afro-Caribbean beliefs. We'll go back into that. We'll delve into it. Not next week, but week after next. In terms of the demographics of the population at Haiti, the population is predominantly of African descent, with a small minority of mixed race and European descent. Of course, the African, the people, those who are of African descent at some point had intermingled with the Aboriginals or the ancients there. So there are some people of African descent who bear some connections with the native people that lived on the island. The history: Haiti was the first independent nation in Latin America and the Caribbean, born out of a successful slave rebellion against French colonial rule in the early 19th century, which we continue to question today. Was it successful? And how are we determining the success? The extent to which that they have received real freedoms and independence, because their independence wasn't recognized at one, and they had to work to pay off a debt. So were they? Did they really? Was it successful? And the current position is that today Haiti continues to face challenges with political instability, poverty, and natural disasters. It received international aid but struggles to achieve significant economic development. In terms of Cuba, the socio-political economy of Cuba, Cuba has a socialist economy with state control over most industries. So in a sense, it's a communist state or a socialist state, and that was a problem for the U.S. And as a result, and right now they suffer embargoes. It has faced economic challenges exacerbated by the U.S. embargo, but has a relatively strong healthcare and education system. Again, a relatively strong healthcare and education system. In fact, they were trying to find a cure for COVID. They are way ahead. If they had the kind of resources and they were and they were allowed to be part of the international community, probably they would have had more success. They would be probably more like a Singapore. But they are blocked from trade and so on because of their decision to operate in this part of the hemisphere, which is predominantly capitalist. So that's a problem. But they have strong education and healthcare system. In fact, I used to work as the head of the guidance and counseling department at the National Youth Service, and what I used to also help to create scholarship programs that send students to Cuba who want to study to become medicine. Jamaica and Cuba had an exchange program where many of our students were trained in Cuba, many of our doctors and so on. In terms of their religion, Cuba is predominantly Christian with a significant influence of Santeria, a syncretic religion combing elements of Catholicism and African religions. In terms of the demographics, the population is diverse with significant Afro-Cuban and mixed race population alongside European descent or descendants. Now, Cuba, in terms of the history, Cuba gained independence from Spain in the late 19th century and later became a socialist state under Fidel Castro's leadership after the Cuban Revolution in 1959. And then you're going to hear about the Bay of Pigs and so on and so forth. But we won't delve into these too much. We're just providing an introduction, and now it's for you guys now to do deeper research and reflections, and probably to ask questions as we go along. But in terms of the current position today, Cuba is that despite economic challenges, Cuba has a relatively high human development index compared to other Caribbean nations. Cuba has a relatively high human development index. I think I talked about that in a previous Caribbean Thought class, looking at the human development index across the Caribbean. in terms of their development. Of course, they have a high development index. A socialist country like that prioritizes education. Everyone is have access to education. Education is free. Okay, so they have a high development index. Its political system remains under scrutiny internationally, and that is what has dogged them. In terms of Dominican Republic, and oh, it's 6 o'clock. But so we're going to stop here, and when we come back, we'll look at Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and then we look at Guyana, Martinique, and the Cayman Islands, Belize, Grenada, Puerto Rico, and then we're going to talk briefly about Fidel Castro, Maurice Bishop, Edward Seaga, and Michael Manley, and Basdeo Panday, and Jean-Bertrand Aristide. So, in fact, I won't even go into I won't go into the next. I was going to talk about, but let's talk about DRM here, Dominican Republic. The socio-political economy of Dominican Republic is that Dominican Republic has a mixed economy with sectors like tourism, agriculture, and manufacturing contributing significantly. Now, it faces challenges such as income inequality, high income inequality, and environmental degradation. Not just Dominican Republic, but all of the Caribbean, but especially Dominican Republic, high income inequality. And in Haiti, all these countries have an elite class, okay? But they have high income inequality and environmental degradation. So too does Haiti. In terms of the religions, again, Catholicism. You see how influential the Catholics are. Catholicism is the dominant religion, but there is also a growing Protestant population in Dominican Republic. Protestant population. Demographics. Of course, you guys know the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. You guys should know that difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. Protestantism is a breakaway from Catholicism, stemming from the Renaissance and the Reformation and the division. Anyway, the demographics of the include the population is predominantly of mixed race or mulatto descent with significant African and European influences. There is again no talk of how the ancient population of the Aboriginal people were mixed in, was part of the mixed race of these people. There was a strong intent to corrupt the identities of Caribbean peoples with the originals. Okay, so, and that's why it's very important for us to divorce ourselves from Eurocentric understanding and narratives that seeks to provide a truth about Caribbean histories and DNA. We have to do it ourselves, and ask and push the questions to its logical end. In terms of history of DR, the Dominican Republic shares the island of Hispaniola with Haiti. It was colonized by Spain and later, and here it is, I said this earlier, it was occupied by Haiti before gaining independence in the 19th century. Yes, the Dominican Republic was occupied by Haitians. Okay. The current position in DR is that the Dominican Republic has seen economic growth in recent years, but still grapples with issues like corruption and inequality. I am going to stop here in terms of looking at the countries. Now, for your homework, for next week, I want, since we're looking at the Caribbean islands, and briefly do a brief description of the Caribbean islands. But actually, I want you guys, see, we're talking about Dominican Republic, come up with your own as it relates. We're going to go into Jamaica. I'm going to talk about this next week, but I want you guys to start thinking about the socio-political economy of Jamaica, the religion in Jamaica, the demographics in Jamaica, the history, the current position. So I want you guys to start thinking about Jamaica. We're going to talk about Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and so on. But what can you guys come up with in terms of looking at the socio-political economy, the religion, demographics, history, current position of those other islands that we haven't dealt with? So you can do Jamaica, Barbados, and this is just and this is very important to get you guys involved in the class. Start thinking about what separates the Caribbean islands. Now, go ahead.
Just a question to that. Are we sticking with islands or countries within CARICOM, or particularly the English-speaking islands, or it doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter. All of the Caribbean, including Spanish, because DR is Spanish. because we're going to talk about. I'm going to also talk about Martinique and Belize next week, Puerto Rico. So you guys can do any one you guys would like to do. But what we're looking at is socio-political economy, religion, demographics, history, and current position. You see how I do it in terms of just a summary, like how I have done it here. Socio-political economy, religion, demographics, history, current position. What can you guys come up with? And you don't have to make it elaborate. The only graded piece of work is the midterm and the exam and the research. That's it. This helps with your interaction and your connection to the class and getting you involved. It also helps me to understand, to see where you are, how you're thinking, and your participation in the course and so on. So this is good for reflection and learning. So it'll be great for you to do that. And I also, when I'm marking your end of your grade, I look at what you've submitted and say, okay, you guys, you've been involved in the class, you've participated, you've submitted work in the class as well. So this is good, and it's good to do this. So, but I'm giving you the flexibility of choosing any island you want to do, any country in the Caribbean you would like to do, looking at their socio-political economy, religion, demographics, history, and their current position, and just a brief summary on these points about the country that you've chosen, and let me see what you guys can come up with. Now, as we wrap up the class, I'm going to end with a 5-minute video about CLR Dream. It's just 5 minutes, and we're going to end at 6:15, and that's it. If you haven't watched the last week's class, by the way, you notice how I made the class amazing. When I finish the class, I spend a lot of time in editing the videos and putting background music and so on, so that you guys can have a beautiful experience when you guys watch it. So, and I make it into a huge documentary. So I hope you guys appreciate that. And I hope you guys have watched the last videos we did for Caribbean Thought, the lecture so far. I hope you guys are loving the videos. And you guys like it? You like what I'm doing with the videos?
I haven't watched it, sir, but I'm definitely going to watch the one from last week when I watch it.
Yeah, man. Oh my God, I make it into a whole premiere. In fact, I posted an excerpt, a trailer of the lecture last week, which I really loved, and it got over 10,000 views already on Twitter alone. They're loving it, and you guys check out the videos, Caribbean Thought on YouTube, or it's on the podcast. It's really beautiful. I put background music and stuff for you guys to enjoy it, and for people to watch it and stuff and learn about the Caribbean and so on and so forth. You can even share it with your people at work or school, in your community, with your family. To the videos are available, and they're really interesting because I rewatch them and I'm like, wow, this is great. So you guys are gonna love the videos for the class. Just you can go to the YouTube video or it's on podcast in Apple or whatever. So we're gonna end with this though. So don't go yet, guys. We're gonna end with this. Hold on, let me bring up this. This is a very important video I'm about to show you, and it's only for 5 minutes. It's about CLR James. Okay, so let me just quickly close this. I'm gonna it's in Caribbean Thought. Go to my playlist. And I think it is in Caribbean and Pan-African Thought. Let me go. Interest. What it is. Saying to before I started the recording. Here we go. I think it should be here. Where is it? Okay, it's on my. Where is it? It's probably in Watch History. Watch later. There we go. Watch later. Found it. But okay.
Because I have to say,
all right, guys. You guys are going to fully appreciate this. What I'm about to show, this video on CLR James. CLR James interview on his book, Black Jacobins. Okay, you guys are going to fully appreciate this, okay? So let me now stop share my screen. And now we'll go back to share my screen. But sure, this is where we end and we pick up next week. But you guys are going to love this.
Christopher Columbus landed first in the New World at the island of San Salvador, and after praising God, inquired urgently for gold. The natives, Red Indians, were peaceable and friendly, and directed him to Haiti.
Are you guys hearing the sound?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, we're hearing.
All
We're
right, great.
hearing.
All right, this is all. I'm going to only play 7 minutes of it, and if you go into Caribbean thought, the rest of it will be available later on. All right, here we go.
Christopher Columbus landed first in the New World at the island of San Salvador, and after praising God, inquired urgently for gold. The natives, Red Indians, were peaceable and friendly, and directed him to Haiti, a large island, nearly as large as Ireland, rich, they said, in the yellow metal. He sailed to Haiti. One of his ships being wrecked, the Haitian Indians helped him so willingly that very little was lost, and of the articles which they brought on shore, not one was stolen. The Spaniards, the most advanced Europeans of their day, annexed the island, called it Hispaniola, and took the backward natives under their protection. They introduced Christianity, forced labor in mines, murder, rape, bloodhounds, strange diseases, and artificial famine by the destruction of cultivation to starve the rebellious. These and other requirements of the higher civilization reduced the native population from an estimated 500,000, perhaps 1 million, to 60,000 in 15 years.
And thus it is that Dr. C.L.R. James, a very distinguished scholar, reads the first 2 paragraphs of his prologue, a remarkable book, a classic, The Black Jacobins, which deals with the Toussaint Louverture-led black slave rebellion in San Domingo 2 years after the French Revolution. In these 2 paragraphs, Dr. James, your style of writing, of course, is a very salubrious one indeed, but the bite, the irony, and the truth, you might say, of white man in all these years, of Western civilization, so-called, in these 2 paragraphs, you've almost essentialized it.
Yes, I think so, and I wrote it quite naturally. I didn't have to search, but I am a West Indian, and we in the West Indies are very much aware of the contrast between what the white man says and what he does, because we are Western civilized in our orientation, so we are aware of all the things he's saying, much more than people who speak a different language or live a different type of civilization.
This very point you make, which you point out, Professor James is now visiting professor at the Northwestern University. The fact that you're West Indian, this has always been a fascinating historical point, isn't it? We think among the leaders and the whole black liberation movement through the years have been West Indians.
Yes, we have had the whole lot of them. We have had Marcus Garvey. We have had Aimé Césaire, the poet, with that magnificent poem on Africa in which he stated the question of negritude. We have had René Marin, who won the Prix Goncourt with the book Batuala on Africa. We have had George Padmore, Marcus Garvey, as I said, and we have had, there is no doubt about it, that Malcolm X's mother was a West Indian, and that had something to do with it, and Stokely Carmichael was born and grew up there as a boy. I also took some part. I believe it is something that is worthwhile, and I know and feel myself as a West Indian as Padmore was.
It's as though two cultures are fused, in a sense.
Yes, we are not admitted completely into the Western culture, but we have all the possibilities of developing it. So on being kept back at home, we went abroad and made the best use of both the opportunities of education and the impulse towards freedom which we felt in the island. That is the reason why the West Indians have done so well. And I would like to add this, that Fidel Castro and the Cubans are not all black people. Fidel isn't black at all. But the attitude of the revolution and what they are doing is essentially a West Indian revolution, similar to what Toussaint Louverture did.
Yes, so we come, in fact, you have an appendix to your book, an epilogue. You wrote the book in 1938, how remarkably prescient and prophetic Professor James' book is, because he dealt with the nature of Africa and the possible independence movements back then. But the epilogue is from Toussaint Louverture to Castro. Now, Toussaint Louverture, and it's imperative, of course, that white people know this. More blacks do, or we know that younger blacks are aware of this. I had difficulty finding this book, by the way, in white bookstores. I found it at the Ellis Bookshop on South Cottage, which is significant in itself, I think.
I think the book now is being sold and read everywhere.
Yes.
I think the movement on the whole, it is being read and studied in universities predominantly white in the United States. That is a fact. Although it's the black movement that has given it the great impetus.
Perhaps we should dwell upon the nature of this book, and it's a terribly important one. It's the Black Jacobins, the subtitle, Toussaint Louverture and the San Domingo Revolution. Now, here you describe a scene. The Spaniards came, the French, the British. They found a great deal of profit to be made in the West Indies, San Domingo, and Haiti. And
it
now,
was the wealthiest colony in the world at the time, not only in the West Indies.
And so, but it could only be done. You describe, of course, the slave trade and the nature of the slave ships and the incredible brutishness. So the question is, how could a people, the black people in this case, the Africans, and this, well, I'll ask you about the mulattoes in a moment, the Creoles, how could they survive is the question. This is the key.
The question is this. Number one, they were a people, obviously, who had basically a very fine physique. Otherwise, they would have been wiped away by the sheer objective circumstances of the Middle Passage and their lives. They had a fine physique, and secondly, which is a most important point, they obviously were a highly civilized people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to be integrated into the sugar production in the way that they were and learn as rapidly as they did the language and all the techniques of Western civilization. They were civilized people in Africa, and today people are more and more recognizing that even when they were slaves in Africa, they were slaves of a certain organized society. That is what must be remembered about the West Indian. And he was more fortunate than he was in the United States because the islands were small, immensely concentrated. The sugar plantation had many of them living together, so they were closely connected. And this backbone of civilization in Africa and African physical strength, and then having to learn the elements of Western civilization, made them what they did and what they have become.
So we come to several points that Dr. James raises, and again, the question of...
I will stop there, and this is very important as we wrap up the class. He asked the question, how could they survive? How could these slaves survive? The answer, and I answered it before and I'm answering it again. They were a people who were of very fine physique. If it weren't so, they would not have been able to survive the Middle Passage. And two, they were highly civilized people who were easily integrated into sugar production and sugar society. They were highly civilized because which suggests that Africa and West African society was organized society. They were very organized. And they were of African physical strength. And so it's quite interesting, and we mentioned this point. When you start to reimagine the slave, we talk about reimagining people within critical race theory, moving away from a victim approach to a hero approach. So when you start to really look at the Africa and who came and how they came. And I said they were able to, and then you asked the question, how were they able to survive? They're able to survive because of the type of African and they're coming from a very civil and organized society. It's quite powerful, quite profound from C.L.R. James here. One other point he made, he said that Fidel Castro and Cuba, they're not black, they're not necessarily black. However, their resistance, their resistance was one that was West Indian, a West Indian. So that was quite powerful when he making comparisons of Fidel Castro and Cubans and their revolution, their resistance, their fight for independence, saying that they may not be black like us, like the other blacks. However, we are still similar because our fight, we have the same fight. And it says it's a West Indian revolution. Quite interesting, quite profound, quite powerful. But we will stop here for today, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussions. Okay, guys? And I hope you guys have a great day, a great weekend, and I'll see you next week, Friday. Okay?
Okay, same to you, sir. Bye.
Yeah, man. Bye-bye. Take care. Remember to watch the video videos. This video will not be available probably not until Sunday or Monday, depending on how quickly I can edit it and spruce it up, as we say. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good time.